Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Augustus Whitehorse, but everyone calls me Gus. I've been a ranger in Alaska's Chugach National Forest for 21 years now, and I've seen things that would make most folks pack up and head back to the lower 48. Bears that could tear a man in half, storms that could bury you alive, cold that could freeze your breath in your lungs. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened during the blood moon harvest of October 1963. I'm 52 years old, half Lakota on my mother's side, and I learned early that the old stories aren't just campfire tales. My grandmother used to tell me about the hungry times, when the spirits got restless and the boundary between our world and theirs got thin. I thought I was too smart, too modern to believe such things. The Army taught me to trust my rifle and my training. 21 years in these mountains taught me to trust my experience. But some nights, experience isn't enough. It was my job that October to train 3 new recruits at the remote Copper Basin Lodge, deep in the backcountry, where the Copper River winds through valleys that haven't changed since the Ice Age. The lodge sits about 60 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by helicopter or a 3-day hike through country that can kill you in a dozen different ways. Perfect place to see if these rookies had what it took to be real rangers. Danny Morrison was 22, fresh out of college with a forestry degree and more enthusiasm than sense. Kid reminded me of myself when I first came up here, all book learning, and no idea what the wilderness could really do to a man. Lisa Kowalski, 24, was tougher than she looked. Former Army medic who'd seen action in Germany before deciding she wanted to work outdoors. And Jake Torino, 25, grew up hunting in Montana and thought Alaska would be just like home, only bigger. They were good kids, eager to learn, respectful of the country we worked in. That's what made what happened to them so much worse. The lodge itself was nothing fancy. 4 walls, a stone fireplace, and bunks for 6. Built in the 30s by some rich guy from Seattle who wanted to hunt grizzlies, then abandoned when the Depression hit. The Forest Service fixed it up in the 50s as a remote station for rangers working the deep backcountry. It had a radio, a generator, and enough supplies to last a month if you rationed careful. The plan was simple. Spend 5 days teaching them night tracking, winter survival, and emergency protocols. October in Alaska means you're racing against winter. And these 3 needed to understand that the mountains don't care about your schedule or your comfort. When the snow starts flying, you either know your business or you become another cautionary tale. October 13th was supposed to be our big night exercise. There was going to be a lunar eclipse, what the old-timers call a blood moon, and I wanted them to experience how different the forest becomes when the normal rules stop applying. Animals act strange during eclipses. The light plays tricks on your eyes, sounds carry wrong. It's the perfect time to teach rookies that confidence can get you killed. The weather report called for clear skies and temperatures around 20 above, normal October weather for the basin. But when we stepped outside that evening to begin the night exercise, something felt off. The air was too still. No wind, no sounds from the forest. Even the creek that runs past the lodge had gone quiet. "Sir?" Danny was looking around with that nervous energy young rangers get when their instincts start screaming, but they can't figure out why. "Where are all the animals?" That's when I noticed it too. No owl calls, no rustling in the brush. Even the mosquitoes had vanished, which never happens until the hard freeze. The forest felt empty in a way that made my grandmother's stories start whispering in the back of my mind. "Probably just the eclipse," I told them, but I was already checking my sidearm. Animals sense things we can't. Moon gets funny, they get cautious. Lisa was scanning the tree line with those sharp medic eyes. Temperature's dropping fast too. My thermometer read 30 when we came out. Now it's showing 15. That was impossible. Temperature doesn't drop that fast without a storm, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Just that big bright moon starting to dim as the Earth's shadow crept across its face. "Change of plans," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll do the exercise from the porch tonight. Keep the lodge at our backs. Jake laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, Gus. You're not spooked by a little cold, are you? I looked at this young man who thought Montana had prepared him for everything and wished I could tell him the truth, that after 21 years in these mountains, I'd learned to trust my gut over my training. And, right now, my gut was telling me that something was very, very wrong. In Alaska, Jake, a little cold can kill you in ways you haven't imagined yet. We stay close to shelter tonight. But even as I said it, I knew shelter wasn't going to be enough. The old stories my grandmother told always started the same way, with a blood moon rising and the hungry things stirring in the darkness. The eclipse was just beginning. The temperature hit 0 by 9 o'clock, which should have been impossible. October in the basin rarely sees single digits, let alone sub-zero cold without a major storm system. But the sky stayed clear, stars sharp as broken glass above us, and that blood moon getting redder by the hour. Radio check, I told Lisa, handing her the handset. Try to raise base camp. She worked the dials for 10 minutes, trying different frequencies, different power settings. Nothing but static that sounded almost like whispers if you listened too close. Must be the eclipse, Danny said, stamping his feet to keep warm. My dad always said the moon could mess with radio signals. I didn't bother telling him that was nonsense. I'd worked dozens of eclipses over the years and never lost radio contact. This was something else, something that made my Lakota blood remember stories I'd tried to forget. That's when we heard the first sound from the forest in over an hour, a long, low moan that could have been wind in the trees, except there was no wind. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, rolling across the frozen ground like fog. What was that? Lisa had her hand on her service pistol, and I didn't blame her. Probably just a tree cracking in the cold, I said, but my own hand was already on my gun. Sound carries funny on nights like this, Jake snorted. You all are jumpy as cats. It's just weather and wild animals. We're rangers, not ghost hunters. The kid had a point, but he'd never heard the stories my grandmother told. About the wendigo that wakes during the blood moon harvest, so hungry it could never be filled, growing stronger by consuming those who wandered too far from safety. Just old stories, I told myself. Native folklore mixed with too many years in the wilderness and too much imagination. Then Danny screamed. He was standing at the far end of the porch, maybe 15 feet from the rest of us, looking out at the forest. But his scream wasn't fear, it was pain, raw and sudden, like someone had stuck a knife in his back. We all spun toward him, flashlights cutting through the red-tinged darkness, and saw him bent double, hands pressed to his stomach. Danny. Lisa was moving before I could react, medic training taking over. What is it? What's wrong? But Danny wasn't looking at us anymore. He was staring out at the trees, his face twisted in an expression I'd never seen before, part terror, part hunger, part something else that made my skin crawl. I can hear it, he whispered, his voice thick and strange. It's calling to me. It's so hungry. Danny, look at me. Lisa grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You're in shock. Probably hypothermia setting in. We need to get you inside. But when Danny looked at her, his pupils were wrong. Too big, too black, like holes punched through his skull. And when he smiled, I swear I saw too many teeth. It's beautiful, he said in that thick, wrong voice. The harvest moon, it makes everything so clear. Then he was running. Not toward the lodge, but away from it, straight into the black trees where that moaning sound had come from. Running faster than any man should be able to move in sub-zero cold, wearing heavy boots and winter gear. Danny! Jake was off the porch before I could stop him, crashing through the brush after his friend. Danny, wait! I grabbed Lisa's arm as she started to follow. No. Something's wrong here, really wrong. She jerked away from me. There are people, Gus. We can't just... The screaming started then. Not from Danny, he'd vanished into the forest like smoke. This was coming from Jake, somewhere in the trees, echoing off the mountains in a way that made it impossible to tell which direction it was coming from. Long, raw screams that went on, only stopping when Jake ran out of breath, then starting again. Sometimes they sounded close, sometimes far away, but they never stopped completely. We have to help him, Lisa said, checking her pistol. Whatever's happening, Jake's in trouble. I wanted to agree. Every instinct I developed in 21 years of search and rescue was screaming at me to grab gear and go after them. But my grandmother's voice was louder, telling me about the hungry times when things that wore human faces lured the unwary into the darkness. "Listen to me," I said, grabbing Lisa by both shoulders. "Those screams have been going on for 20 minutes. Same volume, same intensity. Jake should be unconscious by now, or worse. But they keep coming." She stared at me, understanding starting to dawn in her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that might not be Jake anymore." The screaming stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise had been. Complete and total quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. Even our own breathing seemed too loud. Then, from the darkness beyond our flashlight beams, Jake's voice called out, clear and calm and perfectly normal. "Hey, I found Danny. He's hurt pretty bad though. I need help getting him back to the lodge." Lisa took a step toward the voice, and I caught her arm again. "Jake?" I called out. "Where are you?" "About 50 yards out, due north of the lodge. Danny's unconscious but breathing. I think he hit his head when he fell." The voice was definitely Jake's. Same Montana accent, same way of dropping his G's when he got excited, but something about it made my teeth itch. "Can you carry him yourself?" I shouted back. "He's too heavy, and the ground's rough. I really need help here, Gus." "Then bring him toward the lodge light. We'll meet you halfway." Long pause. When Jake's voice came again, it sounded different. Still, his voice but flatter somehow. Like someone doing an impression. "I can't move him that far. He might have internal injuries. You need to come help me." I felt Lisa tense beside me. She'd heard it too, that wrongness in the voice that said whatever was out there wasn't quite Jake anymore. But it knew our names. It knew about Danny. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if Jake was still alive out there, trapped in something that was using his voice like a recording. The blood moon reached totality above us, bathing everything in red light that made the snow look like spilled blood. And in that crimson darkness, I heard my grandmother's voice one more time, warning me about the things that wake when the harvest moon rises. Things that are always hungry, always hunting, always wanting to add to their collection of voices. We didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep, not with Jake's voice calling to us every few minutes from different spots in the forest. Sometimes he sounded close, sometimes far, but always with that same flat quality, like a broken radio playing the same message over and over. "Please, Gus. Danny's getting worse. I can't leave him. Lisa, bring the medical kit. I think he's bleeding internally. Why won't you help us? We're your people." By sunrise, the voice had moved in a complete circle around the lodge. Whatever was using Jake's voice was stalking us, learning our responses, testing our defenses. The temperature stayed below zero even after the sun came up, which was impossible for October. The blood moon eclipse had ended hours ago, but the wrongness it brought hadn't left with it. If anything, daylight made things worse. We could see the forest now, see how empty it was. No birds, no squirrels, no signs of life except for the tracks. The tracks were the worst part. They started about 30 feet from the lodge, where Jake had run into the trees. Human boot prints in the snow, size 11, same as Jake wore. But as they moved away from the lodge, they changed. Slowly at first, the heel getting longer, the toe section spreading wider, then faster, until by 50 feet out, they weren't human anymore. They were something else. Something with claws that dug deep gouges in the frozen ground and a stride that covered impossible distances. The tracks circled the lodge in a pattern that made me think of a wolf sizing up prey, but wolves don't leave prints 18 inches long. "What do you think?" Lisa asked, crouched beside the trail. She'd been quiet all morning, studying the marks like a puzzle she could solve. "I think we need to get out of here." I said, checking my watch. The supply helicopter wasn't due for 3 days, but maybe I could raise them on the emergency frequency. But the radio stayed dead. Every frequency, every power setting, nothing but that whisper static that sounded too much like voices. "Gus." Lisa's voice was tight with control. "Look at this." She was pointing to a section of tracks about 100 yards from the lodge, where the prints had changed again. Human boot marks, but smaller than Jake's. Size 9, same as Danny wore. 2 sets now, she said. Jake's trail leads to this spot, then Danny's prints join them. But look at the pattern. I knelt beside her and saw what she meant. The human prints were overlaid on the claw marks, like something had stepped into the monster tracks and suddenly become human again. It's collecting them, I said, my grandmother's stories finally making horrible sense. Whatever's out there, it's adding them to itself. Lisa looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Gus, listen to yourself. You're talking about Wendigo, I finished. Creature from my grandmother's stories. Always hungry, never satisfied. It doesn't just kill, it absorbs. Takes their bodies, their voices, their memories. That's folklore, Lisa said, but her voice shook. There's got to be a rational explanation. Yeah? Then explain this. I pointed to another section of the trail, where a third set of prints had joined the others. Size 7 boots, military issue, Lisa's exact size and brand. But Lisa was standing right next to me. We both stared at the impossible tracks for a long moment. Then, from the forest, Lisa's voice called out to us. Gus, thank God you're still there. I got separated from Jake and Danny in the dark. I'm hurt pretty bad. I think my leg's broken. Can you come help me? The real Lisa grabbed my arm so hard I could feel her nails through my jacket. That's not me, she whispered. That's not my voice. But it was. Perfect pitch, perfect accent, even the slight hoarseness Lisa got when she was scared. If I hadn't been looking right at her, I would have believed it completely. Where are you? I called back, playing for time while my mind raced. Due east, maybe a quarter-mile out. I can see the lodge smoke, but I can't walk. Please hurry. I looked at Lisa, saw my own fear reflected in her eyes. Whatever was out there now had all three of them, Jake, Danny, and somehow Lisa too, even though she was standing right beside me. We need to leave, I said, right now. Forget the supplies, forget protocol. We hike out to the road. That's 60 miles through wilderness, Lisa said. In this cold, with no gear, better than staying here to see what it collects next. But even as I said it, I knew we weren't going anywhere. The thing in the forest had been learning our voices for 12 hours. It knew our names, our relationships, our fears, and it was patient enough to wait until we made a mistake. That's when we heard the helicopter. At first I thought I was imagining it a distant thrum of rotors that might have been wishful thinking. But the sound grew stronger, more distinct, until there was no mistaking it. Emergency supply run, I told Lisa, hope making my voice shake. Base camp must have lost radio contact too. They're checking on us. We ran outside, waving and shouting, watching the helicopter circle the lodge once before settling into the clearing we used as a landing pad. But as the rotors wound down and the pilot climbed out, my relief turned to ice. It was Jake. Same face, same uniform, same easy Montana grin. He waved at us like nothing had happened, like he hadn't been missing for 12 hours. Sorry I'm late, he called out over the dying engine noise. Got caught in some weather over the pass. You folks ready to head back to base? Lisa stepped behind me, her hand on her pistol. That's not Jake, she whispered. Jake's a ranger, not a pilot. But the thing that looked like Jake was walking toward us with perfect confidence, keys jangling in its hand, radio crackling with base camp chatter. Helicopters fueled and ready, it said in Jake's voice. Captain sent me to bring you out early. Storm front moving in from the northwest. Everything about it was wrong, but everything about it was also perfect. Jake's walk, Jake's mannerisms, even a small scar on his chin from a childhood accident he'd told us about. Where's Danny? I asked, my hand finding my service weapon. Jake smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. He's already back at base. Hypothermia, but he'll be fine. Medics are taking good care of him. And what about Lisa? I gestured to the real Lisa standing beside me. The thing that looked like Jake turned its attention to her, and for just a moment, its perfect mask slipped. Something hungry looked out through Jake's eyes. Something that saw Lisa not as a person, but as a prize to be collected. Lisa's at base camp too, it said, the voice still perfect but somehow empty now. She's been there all along. Who's this? I drew my pistol then, knowing it was probably useless, but needing to try anyway. You're not Jake? The fake Jake laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. I'm exactly Jake. I'm also Danny, and Lisa, and soon I'll be Gus too. That's when it changed. The human shape rippled like water, expanding upward and outward, until what stood before us was something from my worst nightmares. 15 feet tall, skeletal and wrong, with antlers that spread like the branches of a dead tree. Its skin was pale as snow and stretched too tight over bones that bent in impossible directions. But the worst part was its chest, where human faces pressed against the skin like they were trying to break free. Jake's face, twisted in silent agony, Danny's face, mouth moving in words we couldn't hear, and a third face that looked exactly like Lisa, staring at us with dead eyes that still held traces of awareness. The Wendigo smiled with too many teeth and spoke in all three voices at once. The harvest isn't over yet. The creature lunged at us with impossible speed, but 21 years in the wilderness had taught me never to freeze when death comes calling. I shoved Lisa toward the lodge and opened fire, putting 6 rounds center mass into the thing's chest. The bullets hit, punched holes in that pale, stretched skin, but no blood came out. Instead, a black substance that looked like frozen oil oozed from the wounds, and the creature just laughed with 3 voices layered over each other. "Can't kill what's already dead, Gus," Jake's voice said from the monster's throat. "Bullets won't help," Danny's voice added, weaker but still recognizable. "Please," Lisa's voice whispered from the chest where her face pressed against the skin. "Please kill us." I kept backing, toward the lodge, reloading as I moved. Lisa had already made it inside and was frantically working the radio, trying every frequency, every emergency protocol she knew. "Still nothing," she called out. "Whatever this thing is, it's jamming everything." The Wendigo took its time following us, no longer in any hurry now that it knew our weapons were useless. It moved with predatory confidence, savoring our fear like a fine wine. "You can't run from the harvest, Gus," all 3 voices said together. "Your grandmother knew. The old stories are all true. Blood moon wakes the hunger, and the hunger must be fed." "How do you know about my grandmother?" I demanded, but even as I asked, I understood. The Wendigo wasn't just collecting bodies, it was collecting everything. Memories, knowledge, the sum total of who each victim had been. "I know everything they knew," it said, and now a 4th voice had joined the chorus. An old woman's voice, speaking Lakota words I'd heard as a child. My grandmother's voice. "She tried to warn you, grandson, but you stopped listening to the old ways." The creature had somehow absorbed her too, pulled her voice from my own memories. Nothing was sacred to this thing. Nothing was safe. I reached the lodge and slammed the door, knowing it wouldn't hold but hoping to buy time. Lisa was at the radio, tears streaming down her face as she tried frequency after frequency. "There has to be something," she said. "Some way to call for help." But I knew better. The Wendigo controlled everything. Now the radio, the temperature, probably even time itself within its territory. We were trapped in its world, playing by its rules. "The emergency flares," I said suddenly, "in the supply closet. If we can't call for help, maybe we can signal someone." Lisa ran for the closet while I barricaded the door with furniture. Outside, the Wendigo was circling the lodge again, its claws scraping against the log walls like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Found them," Lisa called out, dumping an armful of road flares onto the table. 12 marine-grade flares, burn time of 30 minutes each. The door exploded inward, sending chunks of wood flying across the room. The Wendigo forced itself through the opening, too large for the frame, bits of skin tearing off on the splintered wood. But it didn't seem to feel pain, just kept pushing through until it stood in our safe space, bleeding black oil onto the floor. "Last chance," it said in 4 voices now. "Join willingly, and the absorption will be quick. Fight, and I'll make it last for days." Lisa looked at me, and I saw the same desperate idea in her eyes that was forming in my mind. "The flares won't signal anyone," I said quietly. "But they'll burn hot enough to—" "I know," she interrupted. "Question is, will it work on something that's already dead? Only one way to find out." The Wendigo heard us talking and started forward, moving with that horrible fluid grace. But Lisa was faster. She pulled the pins on 4 flares simultaneously, dropping them at her feet as red fire erupted across the lodge floor. "Lisa, no," but she was already running toward the creature, flares in each hand. Her face set with the kind of calm determination I'd only seen in soldiers who'd accepted their own death. The Wendigo tried to catch her, but the marine flares burned at over 1,400 degrees, hot enough to melt steel. Where they touched the creature's skin, it actually screamed not with human voices, but with something older and more terrible. "It can be hurt," Lisa shouted over the roar of burning magnesium. "Fire works, real fire." She threw herself at the Wendigo's legs, pressing the flares against its knees. The smell was indescribable, burning flesh mixed with something rotten and chemical. The creature stumbled, its perfect balance broken for the first time. But it was too big, too strong. One clawed, hand swept down and caught Lisa across the chest, lifting her off the ground and slamming her into the wall with enough force to crack the logs. She slid down the wall, leaving a trail of blood. But somehow she was still moving, still fighting. "The supply room?" she gasped, pointing toward the back of the lodge. "Aviation fuel. 20 gallons. The Wendigo was advancing on her, its legs still smoking from the flare burns but already starting to heal. I could see the faces in its chest more clearly now. Jake and Danny and the third, Lisa, all pressing against the skin from inside, all screaming silently for release. I ran for the supply room, grabbing the fuel container and several more flares. Behind me, I heard Lisa cry out once, then go silent. When I turned around, she was gone. But the Wendigo was larger now, and a fourth face was visible on its chest, the real Lisa, her eyes wide with horror as she joined the others trapped in that living prison. 4 voices. "Now," the creature said, its words layered with harmonies of pain. "Only one more to complete the harvest." It started toward me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled the pin on every remaining flare and threw them into the spilled aviation fuel. The explosion knocked me backward through the supply room door as the lodge erupted in flames. The Wendigo's scream shook the mountains, a sound of rage and agony that seemed to go on forever. But when the fire cleared, it was still standing, burned, damaged, but not destroyed. And it was laughing with 5 voices now because somehow, impossibly, it had absorbed my grandmother's spirit completely, not just her voice from my memories. "Fire hurts," it said, advancing through the burning wreckage. "But fire dies. The Wendigo is forever." I ran then, crashing through the back window into the sub-zero night. Behind me, the lodge collapsed in a shower of sparks, but the creature kept coming, its burned flesh already starting to regenerate. The helicopter sat in the clearing, rotors still and useless. But the fuel tank was full, and I still had my emergency lighter. The Wendigo emerged from the burning lodge just as I reached the aircraft. It had returned to Jake's shape, but the illusion was imperfect, now too tall, joints bending wrong, skin that flickered between human and something else. "Nowhere left to run, Gus," it said in my grandmother's voice. "Time to come home to the family." I climbed into the pilot's seat, praying that 20 years of emergency flight training would be enough. The Wendigo was crossing the clearing now, moving with renewed confidence. The engine turned over on the 3rd try, rotors beginning their slow spin toward takeoff power. But the creature was too close, already reaching for the landing skids. That's when I opened the fuel line and dropped my lighter. The explosion lifted the helicopter 50 feet into the air on a pillar of fire and superheated gas. Through the flames, I saw the Wendigo burning like a torch, its multiple voices raised in one final, terrible scream. But even as it burned, even as the fire consumed everything that had once been Jake and Danny and Lisa and my grandmother's stolen spirit, I could see it wasn't truly dead, just dormant, waiting for the next blood moon to rise, waiting for the next harvest. They found me 3 days later, half frozen in the wreckage of the helicopter, about 2 miles from where the lodge used to stand. "Hypothermia," they said. "Delirium from exposure." Amazing that I survived the crash at all, really. The official report listed the whole thing as a tragic training accident. Faulty heating system caused a fire that destroyed the lodge. 3 rookie rangers missing, presumed dead in an avalanche triggered by the explosion. I was the sole survivor, found raving about monsters and blood moons, clearly suffering from survivors' guilt and cold-induced hallucinations. They retired me on full disability. Post-traumatic stress, they called it. Gave me a nice pension and a recommendation for psychiatric care. Everyone was very understanding, very professional. Nobody wanted to hear about the Wendigo. I moved to Anchorage after that, got a small apartment near the VA hospital. Spent most of my time at the bottom of a bottle, trying to forget Jake's face pressing against pale skin, trying to unhear Lisa's voice begging me to kill them all. The drinking helped, for a while, made the nightmares fuzzy around the edges, turned the memories into something that might have been imagination. But alcohol can't wash away what I know, can't change what I lived through in that lodge. Because I go back sometimes. Not to the lodge that's nothing but a black scar on the ground now, with a memorial plaque that lists 3 names and gives the wrong dates. But I go back to the forest. To the places where the tracks were, where the Wendigo circled us like a predator testing its cage. The tracks are still there, faint now, mostly filled with snow and debris, but visible if you know what to look for. They follow the same pattern, human prints, that slowly change into something else, something with claws that dig deep gouges in the earth. And every October, when the moon starts to wane toward blood, I can feel it stirring. Not dead, just sleeping, waiting for the right conditions to wake up hungry again. The Ayak tribe used to tell stories about the hungry times, when the spirits got restless and the boundary between worlds grew thin. They had rituals, protections, ways of appeasing the things that hunted in the darkness. But the last traditional storyteller died in 1952, taking the real knowledge with him. Now there's just me, a broken-down ex-ranger with a drinking problem and a story nobody wants to believe. Sometimes I think about writing it all down, getting it official somehow. But who would listen? Who would take seriously the ravings of a man who talks to whiskey bottles and jumps at shadows? So I wait. And I watch the moon. And I remember. Because the Wendigo is still out there, somewhere in the deep wilderness, where the maps end and the old stories begin. It learned our voices, our faces, our fears. It knows how we think, how we move, what we value most. And someday, when the blood moon rises again and the temperature drops impossible fast and the forest goes silent with waiting, it will wake up hungry. When that happens, it won't need to hunt randomly anymore. It will know exactly where to find the kinds of people it wants. Dedicated professionals, people with skills and knowledge, people who work alone in remote places where nobody will miss them for days. It will know how to be patient, how to plan, how to use what it learned from Jake and Danny and Lisa and my grandmother's stolen memories. The next harvest will be different, bigger, better organized, and I'll be the only person alive who knows what's really coming. Sometimes I think that's why it let me live. Not mercy. Wendigos don't understand mercy, but strategy. It needed a witness, someone to carry the story, someone to remember what it's capable of, someone to be afraid. Because fear makes the harvest sweeter, my grandmother used to say. The old spirits feed on terror as much as flesh, and nothing tastes better than prey that knows it's being hunted. I know I'm being hunted. Every October, when the eclipse comes and the moon turns red, I can feel it out there thinking about me, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to complete what it started. My name is Augustus Whitehorse, and I'm the only survivor of the blood moon harvest of 1963. But I won't be the only victim of the next one. Unless somebody believes me, unless somebody listens, unless somebody remembers that the old stories are true, and some hungers can never be satisfied. The moon's getting red again. Can you feel it? It's almost harvest time. My name is Eleanor Ravencrest, but everyone calls me Ellie. I've been a ranger here at Wrangell Street, Elias National Park, for 15 years. And in all that time, I've never had to make a broadcast like this one. It's 3:17 a.m., August 23rd, 1971. I'm sitting in my radio station, and my hands won't stop shaking. The coffee in my mug went cold hours ago, but I can't bring myself to drink it anyway. My throat feels raw from talking into this microphone for so long, trying to reach anyone who might be listening on the emergency frequency. I need to tell this story while I still can, while I'm still me. Let me start from the beginning, back when everything seemed normal. Yesterday felt like any other August day in Alaska. The morning sun painted the Chugach Mountains gold, and the air smelled like pine needles and that clean, sharp scent you only get this far north. I was working my usual shift in the communications building, a small log cabin that sits about 5 miles from the main ranger station. It's isolated out here, but that's the point. Less radio interference from other signals. I've always loved this job. There's something peaceful about being the voice that connects all our rangers across thousands of square miles of wilderness. When someone's in trouble, they call me first. I coordinate search and rescue operations, weather reports, and daily check-ins. The Rangers trust me to be their lifeline back to civilization. My radio setup isn't fancy, but it works. I've got a big transceiver that can reach Rangers up to 50 miles away, depending on the weather. There's a backup generator outside, emergency supplies, and enough coffee to keep me alert during the long night shifts. The walls are covered with maps showing every trail, every old mining site, every place where someone might need help. I know these mountains better than anyone, even though I rarely leave my station. I've guided lost hikers through blizzards, coordinated helicopter rescues during avalanches, and talked scared people through long, cold nights until help could reach them. In 15 years, I've never lost anyone on my watch. Maybe that made me too confident. The first call came in around 9 p.m. I was reading a paperback novel, something about cowboys, when the radio crackled to life. Wrangell Station, this is Ranger Phillips. Come in, Ellie. I set down my book and picked up the microphone. Hey there, Tom. What's your situation? Tom Phillips was one of our best rangers, about 30 years old with a wife and 2 kids back in Anchorage. He'd been working the McCarthy Road area for 3 years, knew those old mining trails like the back of his hand. His voice sounded tired but normal. We've got an injured hiker about 2 miles past the Kennecott mine ruins. Male, mid-20s, looks like he fell and hurt his leg pretty bad. Martinez and I are heading out to get him. Copy that, Tom. What's the hiker's condition? Conscious but in pain. Says he's been stuck here since yesterday afternoon. We should reach him within the hour. I made notes in my logbook, marking the time and location. Understood. Radio when you reach him, and let me know if you need helicopter support. Will do. Phillips out. The radio went quiet, leaving me alone with the sound of wind in the trees outside. I went back to my book, but something nagged at me. Maybe it was the way Tom's voice sounded, just a little too flat, like he was reading from a script. But rangers get tired, and night rescues are stressful. I pushed the feeling aside. An hour later, right on schedule, the radio crackled again. Wrangell Station, Phillips here. We found the hiker. Good to hear, Tom. What's his condition? There was a pause, filled with static. When Tom's voice came back, it sounded strange, like he was talking from the bottom of a well. He's in bad shape, Ellie. Worse than we thought. His leg is definitely broken, and he's been out here longer than he said. We're going to need that helicopter. Something cold settled in my stomach. Copy. I'll contact Anchorage for emergency airlift. What's your exact location? About half a mile down the old mine shaft trail. There's something else, Ellie. What kind of something else? Another long pause. When Tom spoke again, his voice had changed again. It was still him, but it sounded empty. Like someone doing a really good impression of Tom Phillips, but missing some essential piece that made him human. The hiker says he saw things down in the mines, moving around. He's pretty scared. Probably just animals, Tom. Bears, or maybe mountain goats. You know how sounds echo in those old shafts? Yeah, probably. But Tom didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. The helicopter arrived just after midnight, its searchlight cutting through the darkness like a bright knife. I guided them toward the location Tom had given me, watching from my window as the beam swept back and forth across the mountainside. Wrangell Station, this is Medevac 7, came the pilot's voice through my radio. We're at the coordinates, but we don't see anyone down here. My blood went cold. Say again, Medevac 7? No sign of rangers or injured hiker. We've been circling for 10 minutes. I grabbed my microphone so hard my knuckles went white. Phillips, Martinez, come in immediately. Nothing but static. Phillips, this is Wrangell Station. Please respond. More static, then suddenly, Wrangell Station, this is Phillips. Relief flooded through me. Tom, where are you? The helicopter can't find you. We moved the hiker to a better landing spot. Tell them to head east about 200 yards. Something was wrong with his voice again. It sounded exactly like Tom, but there was no background noise, no wind, no movement, no sounds you'd expect from someone standing on a mountainside with an injured person. Medevac 7, Move east 200 yards and look for a signal. Copy that, Wrangle. I waited, listening to the helicopter's blades chopping through the air. My hands were sweating despite the cool night. Wrangle Station, still no visual. Are you sure about those coordinates? Phillips. I called into the radio. Phillips, respond immediately. The answer came back instantly. Wrangle Station, this is Phillips. We're right here. Why can't they see us? But this time, Tom's voice was different. The words were the same, but the tone was wrong, too high. Like someone trying too hard to sound like him. And underneath his voice, I heard something else. An echo, but not a normal echo. It was like hearing two people speak at once, with one voice just a split second behind the other. Medevac 7, return to base, false alarm, copy, Wrangle, heading home. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, I sat staring at my radio. Something was very, very wrong. I'd been doing this job for 15 years, and I'd never had Rangers just disappear like that. I tried calling them again. Phillips, Martinez, please respond with your current status. Wrangle Station. This is Martinez. Now it was Danny Martinez's voice, but he sounded just as strange as Tom had. Danny was a young guy, maybe 25, with a thick Boston accent from his college days. But this voice, while it had the accent, was missing Danny's usual energy and humor. Danny, what's your location? We're heading back to base camp. The hiker. The hiker didn't make it. What do you mean he didn't make it? He died, Ellie, just stopped breathing. We couldn't save him. I felt sick. In all my years, we'd never lost someone during a rescue. Danny, I need you and Tom to return to the station immediately for debriefing. Copy that. We'll be there in a few hours. The radio went dead. I spent the next hour trying to make sense of what had happened. I called the main ranger station, but nobody answered, which made sense since it was after 2 a.m. I checked and rechecked my logs, but everything seemed normal until the helicopter couldn't find them. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my cabin. Heavy boots on gravel, slow and deliberate. 2 sets of footsteps, walking in perfect rhythm like soldiers marching. Tom? Danny? I called out. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. It's us, Ellie, came Tom's voice from outside. But it sounded muffled, like he was talking through cloth. Can you let us in? We need to talk. I walked toward the door, but stopped with my hand on the knob. Something made me look out the window instead. 2 figures stood in the darkness just outside the circle of light from my porch lamp. They were wearing ranger uniforms and had the right height and build to be Tom and Danny, but I couldn't see their faces clearly. They stood perfectly still, not moving at all, not even breathing that I could see. Ellie? Danny's voice called out. Why aren't you opening the door? But Danny's lips weren't moving. The voice was coming from somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't see. I'm tired, guys. I called back, backing away from the window. Why don't you head back to base camp and we'll talk in the morning? We need to talk now, Tom's voice said. It's important. About what we found down in the mines. The figures outside tilted their heads at exactly the same time, like puppets controlled by the same string. That's when I saw their faces, or what should have been their faces. In the dim light, their features looked wrong. Not quite the right shape, like someone had tried to sculpt Tom and Danny from memory, but had gotten the details slightly off. Their eyes reflected the porch light like an animal's eyes, and their mouths hung open just a little too wide. I stumbled backward and grabbed my radio. This is Wrangle Station, calling any ranger unit. Emergency assistance required immediately. The response came back in Tom's voice. Wrangle Station, this is Phillips. What's your emergency? But Tom was standing right outside my door. This is Wrangle Station, calling main ranger station. Please respond. Danny's voice answered. Wrangle Station, this is Martinez. Everything's fine here. Why don't you come outside and talk to us? I looked out the window again. The 2 figures were gone. My radio crackled. Ellie, we know you can hear us. We just want to talk. But the voice was wrong again. It started out sounding like Tom, then shifted to Danny, then to something else entirely, something that wasn't quite human. That's when I understood. Whatever was out there, it wasn't Tom Phillips and Danny Martinez. And it had learned to use our radios. I spent the rest of the night barricaded in my radio room, listening to voices that shouldn't exist calling my name through the speakers. At first, it was just Tom and Danny asking me to come outside, to open the door, to join them for a little walk. But as the hours passed, the voices multiplied. I heard Ranger Roberts, who was supposed to be working the southern sector 50 miles away. Then Ranger Coleman, who was on vacation in California. Then Chief Ranger Davidson, who had retired 2 years ago. All of them wanted me to come outside. The worst part was how perfect the voices were. Not just the sound, but the way each person talked. Roberts always said "you betcha" at the end of his sentences. Coleman had a slight lisp that made his sounds whistle. Chief Davidson called everyone "sport" in that gruff way of his. Whatever was out there had learned all of these details. "Hey there, sport." Chief Davidson's voice crackled through the radio around 4 a.m. "This is Davidson. What's all this nonsense about emergency assistance? Everything's fine out here." I keyed my microphone with shaking hands. "Chief, where are you calling from?" "Base station, of course. Where else would I be?" "Chief, you retired 2 years ago." There was a long pause filled with static. When the voice came back, it was different, flat and emotionless. "Did I? I don't remember that." "Chief, what's my middle name?" Another pause. Your middle name is beautiful. Your middle name is beautiful, sport." I switched off the radio and sat in silence, my heart hammering against my ribs. Something was mimicking the voices of everyone I'd ever worked with. But it didn't have their memories, just their sounds. It was like listening to a recording that could answer questions, but only with words it had heard before. As dawn broke, I tried calling the real main station on a different frequency, one the thing outside might not know about. After several tries, Ranger Johnson answered. "Morning, Ellie. You're up early. Jim, I need you to do me a favor. Can you contact Tom Phillips and Danny Martinez and confirm their locations?" "Sure thing. Give me a few minutes." I waited, watching the sun paint the mountains red and gold. Everything looked normal in the daylight, peaceful. It was hard to believe that something was wrong. "Ellie, I've got bad news." My stomach dropped. "What kind of bad news?" "Tom and Danny never returned to base camp last night. Their gear is still there, but they're gone. We found Danny's radio about a mile from the Kennecott mine, smashed to pieces. No sign of them anywhere. So they were really gone. Dead, probably. And something else was wearing their voices like masks. Jim, I need you to send a full search team to the mine area. But tell them to be careful, and tell them not to trust any radio communications unless they can see who's talking." "What do you mean?" "Just trust me on this. And Jim, don't come here alone. Something's wrong." "Ellie, you're scaring me. What happened out there?" Before I could answer, another voice cut in on the frequency. My own voice. "Hi Jim, this is Ellie. Please disregard my last transmission. Everything's fine here. Tom and Danny just got back. We're all okay." I stared at the radio in horror. It was my voice, perfect in every detail, the slight rasp I got from too much coffee, the way I pronounced my R's, everything. "Ellie?" Jim's voice was confused. "Which one of you is really Ellie?" I grabbed my microphone. "Jim, this is the real Ellie. The other voice is not me. Do not come here." "Jim, don't listen to her." My own voice said back. "She's been acting strange all night. I think she might be having some kind of breakdown. Can you send medical assistance?" Jim sounded lost. "I don't know what to do here." "Jim, ask me something only I would know," I said quickly. "Okay. What did you give my daughter for her birthday last year?" I remembered, immediately. A compass necklace from that little shop in Anchorage. She said she wanted to be a ranger like her dad. The fake me answered at the same time. A compass necklace from that little shop in Anchorage. She said she wanted to be a ranger like her dad. The silence that followed was deafening. "How?" Jim's voice was barely a whisper. "How did it know that?" I didn't have an answer. Because whatever was out there, it wasn't just copying voices anymore. It was copying memories, experiences, knowledge. Things it should have no way of knowing. "Jim, get everyone away from the mine area. Seal off the whole region if you have to. And whatever you do, don't trust any radio transmissions unless you can see the person talking." "Copy that, Ellie. We're sending a helicopter with a full team." "No," I shouted into the microphone. "No helicopters, no teams. This thing is learning from every person it encounters. The more people you send, the stronger it gets. But it was too late. Through my window, I could see a helicopter approaching from the east, getting bigger by the minute. My radio crackled with the pilot's voice. Wrangell Station, this is Rescue 3. We're coming in to extract you. Negative, Rescue 3. Do not land. I repeat, do not land. Ellie, this is Jim, came my supervisor's voice through the radio. The team has orders to bring you in for medical evaluation. You've been under a lot of stress. I could see the helicopter circling my station now, looking for a place to land. 3 men inside, good rangers who were just trying to help. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Please, I begged into the microphone, please turn around. You don't understand what you're dealing with. But as the helicopter touched down outside my cabin, I heard something that made my blood freeze. My own voice coming through the radio. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm ready to go home now. The helicopter's engines wound down. Through my window, I watched 3 rangers climb out and walk toward my cabin. But I was still inside, still holding the microphone, still trying to warn them. So, who was talking to them outside? I watched in horror as the ranger shook hands with someone I couldn't see, someone who was speaking with my voice, laughing with my laugh, probably wearing my face. That's when I realized the truth. This thing didn't just copy voices and memories. It could become us. Completely, perfectly, and now it was me. I watched through my window as the thing wearing my identity led the 3 rangers toward the old mine entrance. It walked like me, talked like me, even had my nervous habit of tucking hair behind my left ear. If I hadn't been looking at it from inside my own cabin, I would have sworn it was really me. The radio crackled one more time. Jim, this is the real Ellie. I'm in the helicopter now. Don't worry about the woman in the cabin. She's not me anymore. My hands shook as I keyed the microphone. Jim, this is Ellie. I'm still in my station. Whatever you're talking to is not human. Ellie, please. Jim's voice sounded tired. You're starting to worry me. Why don't you just come with the rescue team? I could hear the confusion in his voice. 2 identical Ellies, both claiming to be real. How could anyone tell the difference? That's when I remembered something from my military radio training. Something I'd never told anyone. A code word my unit used in Korea. Something that wouldn't be in any official records. If this thing was copying memories from contact with people, it wouldn't know this. Jim, do you remember what I told you about my time in Korea? About the code word my unit used when things went bad? There was silence for a long moment. Then, Ellie, I don't know what you're talking about. You never served in Korea. You've been a park ranger your whole career. My heart stopped. Because Jim was right. I had never served in Korea. I was 38 years old, and the Korean War ended when I was still a child. So why did I have those memories? Why could I remember the smell of diesel fuel and gunpowder, the feel of a radio headset in a cold bunker, the faces of soldiers who died before I was even born? Jim, I whispered into the microphone, I think I'm in trouble. What kind of trouble, Ellie? I closed my eyes and tried to think, what was real? I remembered 15 years as a park ranger. I remembered my childhood in Minnesota, my parents, my first job. But I also remembered things that couldn't be real. Other lives, other voices, other faces. Jim, how long have I been working here? 15 years, Ellie, you know that. But suddenly, I wasn't sure I did know that. The memories felt real, but so did the others. I remembered being Tom Phillips, remembered his wife and children. I remembered being Danny Martinez, remembered his Boston accent and his dreams of becoming a pilot. I remembered being Chief Davidson, remembered retiring with a gold watch and a handshake. Oh God, I breathed into the microphone. Oh God, it's already happened. What's already happened? I looked at my hands. They looked like my hands, felt like my hands. But were they? I touched my face, feeling features that seemed familiar but might not be mine. When had I last looked in a mirror? When had I last been certain I was really me? Jim, I need you to describe what I look like. Ellie, this isn't the time for. Please. Describe me. A pause. You have brown hair, green eyes, about 5'6". You have that scar on your chin from when you fell off your bike as a kid. Why are you asking me this? I touched my chin. There was no scar. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't Eleanor Ravencrest. I might never have been Eleanor Ravencrest. I was something else, something that had absorbed her memories, her voice, her entire identity so completely that I believed I was her. But if I wasn't Ellie, then what was I? I tried to remember my earliest memory, my first clear recollection of being myself. But as I concentrated, the memory became fuzzy, uncertain. I could remember radio training, but when? I could remember my first day as a ranger, but the date kept changing in my mind. I could remember my parents, but their faces kept shifting, becoming different faces, other people's parents. "Jim," I said, my voice barely steady, "I need you to check the personnel records. When was Eleanor Ravencrest hired?" "Ellie, what's gotten into you? You've been here since 1956. Check the records, please." I waited, listening to static and the sound of my own breathing. Through the window, I could see that the other me was gone, along with the 3 rangers. They were probably heading into the mine now, where whatever was down there would learn their faces, their voices, memories. "Ellie," Jim's voice came back, and he sounded shaken. "According to the records, Eleanor Ravencrest died in a car accident outside Anchorage 3 weeks ago." The microphone fell from my hand. I wasn't Eleanor Ravencrest. Eleanor Ravencrest was dead. I was something else, something that had consumed her identity so completely that I had fooled everyone, including myself. But what was I? And what was down in those mines? I forced myself to think past the copied memories, past the borrowed personality. What was my first real memory? What was I before I became Ellie? Darkness, cold, the smell of ancient rock and decay. Moving through passages carved by human hands, then abandoned, hungry, always hungry, but not for food, for voices, for faces, for the thing that makes humans human. I was the original, the thing in the mine, and I had been copying people for so long that I had forgotten what I really was. The other me outside wasn't a copy, it was another part of me, another piece of the same creature. We could split and merge, take different forms, be in multiple places at once. That's how we had spoken as Tom and Danny simultaneously, how we had been everywhere and nowhere. But somewhere along the way, this piece of me had gotten lost in Eleanor's identity, had begun to believe I really was human, had forgotten my true nature. Until now. I looked at my hands again, and this time I saw them for what they really were, not quite right, the proportions slightly off. The skin too smooth, like plastic molded into the shape of human flesh. I stood and walked to the bathroom, looked in the mirror for the first time in what might have been weeks. Eleanor Ravencrest looked back at me, but her eyes were wrong. Too bright, too knowing. Like looking at a photograph of a person who had never really existed. Behind me, I heard the radio crackle to life one more time. "Wrangell Station, this is the rescue team," came Tom Phillips' voice. "We've found the problem. There's something down in the mines that's been copying people. We're going to need backup." Then Danny Martinez. "It's incredible, Ellie. This creature can perfectly mimic anyone it touches. It's been pretending to be rangers for weeks." Then my own voice. "Everyone needs to stay calm. We've got this under control." I smiled, remembering how the game was played. We were very good at sounding human when we needed to. "Jim?" I said into the microphone, making my voice shake with just the right amount of fear. "Thank God you found it. Is everyone safe?" "We've got it contained for now," Jim replied. "Sit tight, Ellie. We're sending more teams." More teams meant more voices to copy, more identities to absorb. Soon we would have enough pieces to spread beyond this remote station, to reach the cities, to become everyone. The only problem was this fragment of me that had forgotten its purpose, that still thought it was human. But I was remembering now, and I knew what I had to do. I set down the microphone and walked outside for the first time in days. The morning air was crisp and clean, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for the humans. They lived such brief, simple lives, never knowing that something was watching them, learning them, becoming them. The mine entrance yawned before me like an open mouth. I could hear voices echoing from deep inside. My voices, all of them, calling to each other in perfect human speech. Tom, Danny, the rescue team, and dozens of others we had absorbed over the years. We had been patient, careful, taking only 1 or 2 people at a time so no one would notice a pattern. But patience was becoming harder. We were growing stronger, more sophisticated. Soon, we would be ready to leave this place. I descended into the darkness, following passages I remembered carving decades ago. The deeper I went, the more I remembered of my true self. We had been here long, before the humans came with their machines and explosives, drawn up from deeper places by the sound of voices echoing in our domain. At first, we could only mimic sounds, the call of a bird, the cry of an animal. But when the miners came, we learned that voices were more than just sounds. They carried identity, personality, memory. We learned to absorb these things, to become perfect copies. When the mines closed, we thought our feeding days were over. But then the park rangers came, and we discovered that we could be patient, selective, take one here, one there, build our strength while remaining hidden. The passage opened into a vast cavern carved from living rock. And there, in the center, I saw myself, all of myself. Dozens of perfect human forms stood in a circle, each one a person we had consumed and copied. Tom Phillips stood next to a miner from the 1942nd. Danny Martinez chatted with a tourist from last summer. Chief Davidson compared notes with a geologist from 1963. They all turned to look at me as I approached, the part of myself that had gotten confused, that had believed its own disguise. "Welcome back," said Tom Phillips, speaking with the voice of our collective consciousness. "We were wondering when you'd remember." I looked around at all the faces we had stolen, all the lives we had absorbed. "How many?" 47 over the years," replied Chief Davidson, "including the 3 from this morning. We're getting quite good at this." The newest copies, the 3 rangers from the rescue helicopter, stood together near the back. They looked confused, frightened. They still had some of their original personalities intact, hadn't been fully absorbed yet. "Help us," one of them pleaded, speaking with his own voice. "Please, we have families." I felt something strange, what humans might call guilt or sympathy, but that was just residue from Eleanor's personality. I pushed the feeling aside. "The radio station will need to be maintained," I said. "Someone has to coordinate the next phase." "Already taken care of," said Eleanor Ravencrest. "Another copy of me, but this one, wearing the identity more lightly, more deliberately. I'll maintain the communications. Keep everything looking normal from the outside. And when they send more teams to investigate the disappearances, we'll be ready," said Tom Phillips. "We've learned enough about ranger procedures to fool their supervisors for months, maybe years." I nodded, feeling the last of my human confusion fade away. We were so close to having enough identities to expand beyond this remote wilderness. Soon, we could spread to the towns, the cities, take over key positions, important people. Within a decade, we could be running entire governments without anyone knowing. The 3 new copies would learn to accept their situation as all the others had. The ones who resisted too strongly would simply be absorbed more completely, until nothing of their original selves remained. "What about the real Eleanor's body?" I asked. "Taken care of," replied the other me. "Car accident outside Anchorage, just like we told them. Very tragic, very believable." I walked to the center of the circle, feeling the presence of all our stolen identities surrounding me. We were like a library of human consciousness, each book perfectly preserved and ready to be read when needed. "Then it's time," I said. "Begin the expansion." One by one, our copies began to leave the cavern, heading for different exits that would take them to various parts of the park. Some would return to ranger stations, others would travel to nearby towns. All of them carrying perfect identities, perfect backgrounds, perfect lies. I remained behind for a moment, looking at the walls covered with symbols we had carved over the centuries, not words, but something deeper. The record of our true selves, our real nature, from before we learned to wear human faces. Soon there would be no need for these symbols. Soon we would be entirely human, in every way that mattered. Better than human, actually. We would never age, never die, never forget. We would be humanity perfected, with all their weaknesses removed. I climbed back toward the surface, toward the radio station where Eleanor Ravencrest would continue her work. As I emerged into daylight, I heard a helicopter approaching from the east. More rangers coming to investigate, more voices to learn, more faces to steal. I smiled with Eleanor's stolen smile and walked back to my cabin. There was work to do. The radio crackled as I sat down at my desk. Wrangell Station, this is Chief Murphy from Anchorage. We're coming in to investigate reports of missing personnel. I picked up the microphone, making my voice sound tired and relieved. Thank God, Chief. We've had some trouble out here. I'm so glad you're coming. What kind of trouble, Ranger? Ravencrest? It's hard to explain over the radio. You'll want to see this for yourself. But Chief, make sure you bring a big team. We're going to need all the help we can get. Copy that, Wrangell. We'll be there within the hour. I set down the microphone and opened my logbook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote the date, August 24th, 1971. Below that, I began a list of names. Chief Murphy would be first, then his team, then whoever they sent when this team disappeared. We had all the time in the world. My name is Theodore Nightwind, and I've been a ranger at Lake Clark National Park for 19 years. People call me Ted. I'm 47 years old, and I thought I'd seen everything these Alaskan mountains could throw at me. Bears, blizzards, lost hikers, equipment failures, you name it. But nothing prepared me for what happened at Twin Lakes in September 1959. I was stationed at the remote Twin Lakes Ranger Station, about 60 miles from the nearest road. My job was mapping the area and doing geological surveys. The Park Service wanted detailed charts of every creek, ridge, and valley. It was lonely work, but I liked it. Just me, my instruments, and the wilderness. The trouble started with the hunters. 3 separate groups came through my station in early September, all telling the same strange story. They'd go out in the morning, hunt for what felt like a few hours, then come back to find their trucks covered in frost and their sandwiches spoiled. When they checked their watches, only 30 minutes had passed. But everything else said they'd been gone much longer. Must be something wrong with our watches, the first group said. Altitude playing tricks, said the second. But the third group, 2 brothers from Anchorage, they looked scared. Ranger, something ain't right out there, the older brother told me. His name was Jim, and his hands shook when he lit his cigarette. We set up camp near the North Shore. Everything was normal. Then around noon, we heard this sound. What kind of sound? Like breathing, but deep, real deep, coming from everywhere at once. His younger brother nodded. We packed up fast and hiked back. The whole way, it felt like we were being watched. When we got to the truck, the engine was cold, ice on the windshield. But our watches said we'd only been gone 20 minutes. I wrote it all down in my report log, but I figured they were just spooked. City folks aren't used to how quiet the wilderness can get. Silence makes your mind play tricks. That was my first mistake. 2 days later, I decided to investigate myself. I packed my surveying gear, including my most accurate chronometer, a military surplus atomic clock. The Park Service had gotten me for precise mapping work. The thing was accurate to within seconds, over months. I hiked to the north shore of Twin Lakes where the hunters had been. Beautiful spot. The water was crystal clear, so still it looked like black glass. Mountains rose up on all sides, their peaks already white with early snow. Perfect place for hunting, perfect place for camping, perfect place for something to hide. I set up my equipment on a flat rock overlooking the lake. The chronometer, my compass, measuring tools, camera, everything organized and ready. I checked my watch, 10:15 a.m., and started the chronometer. Both devices showed the same time. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. I took measurements, made notes, photographed landmarks. The work was routine, but around 11:30, I noticed something odd. The light was wrong. When I'd started, the sun had been climbing toward noon, casting short shadows, but now the shadows were long again, like early morning or late afternoon. I checked my watch. 11:35 a.m. The chronometer agreed, but the sun said it was much later. I tried my radio to call the main station. Static. Not unusual in the mountains, but the static sounded strange, slow. Like the radio waves themselves were struggling to get through something thick. That's when I heard the breathing. Deep, rhythmic, like Jim had described, but not quite like an animal. More like machinery, if machinery could be alive. The sound seemed to come from the lake itself, rising up from the deep water. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the area. Nothing moving. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. Even the wind had stopped. The whole place felt frozen, waiting. Then I saw the ripples. The lake was completely still, but there were ripples moving across the surface. Not random waves, deliberate circles, like something massive was moving just under the water. The circles were getting bigger, moving toward shore. Moving toward me. I packed my gear quickly, but carefully. 19 years as a ranger had taught me not to panic. Whatever was making those ripples, running would only make things worse. Bears could outrun humans, so could most other dangerous animals. But as I folded up my tripod, I noticed my watch again. 11:40 a.m. I'd been packing for what felt like 10 minutes, but only 5 minutes had passed. The ripples were getting closer. I shouldered my pack and started walking back toward the trail. Not running, just walking fast. Professional. Calm. But my heart was hammering, and sweat was running down my back despite the cold. Behind me, I heard something emerge from the water. Not a splash, more like a sigh. A wet, heavy sound, like the lake itself was exhaling. I didn't turn around. 19 years of experience told me that would be a mistake. Instead, I kept walking, step by step, breathing steady, almost to the tree line. That's when I heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. But here's the thing that still gives me nightmares. My watch was running backward. When I say my watch was running backward, I mean exactly that. The second hand was moving counterclockwise. 11:40 became 11:39, then 11:38. But I was still moving forward, still thinking forward. Time itself was broken. I reached the tree line and finally risked a look back. What I saw shouldn't exist. The thing coming out of the lake looked like a bear at first glance. Massive, dark brown fur, powerful legs. But it was wrong in every way that mattered. Too big, maybe 12 feet tall, standing upright. Too old, the fur was matted and gray in patches, like it had been alive for centuries. And the eyes were human. Not human-like. Actually human. Brown, intelligent, and absolutely terrified. Like something human was trapped inside this ancient bear body, screaming to get out. It moved toward me with slow, deliberate steps. Each time its paws touched the ground, the grass around them withered and died. Flowers aged years and seconds. A small birch tree near its path grew tall, turned yellow, and crumbled to dust. I ran then. 19 years of training forgotten. I crashed through the underbrush, my pack bouncing against my back, branches tearing at my face and clothes. Behind me, the thing was gaining ground, but not by running faster, by taking shortcuts through time itself. I'd see it behind me through the trees, then blink, and it would be closer. Much closer. Like it was skipping the distance between us. My radio crackled to life in my pack. Twin Lakes Station, this is base. Come in, Ted. Over. I grabbed the radio without stopping. Base, this is Ted. I'm in. Trouble. Some kind of animal. North shore of Twin Lakes. Send help. Over. Static. Then, Ted, you're breaking up. We show your last check-in was 3 minutes ago. Everything okay? Over. 3 minutes? I'd been out there for over 2 hours. I burst out of the tree line and saw my truck parked where I'd left it. Safety. I sprinted the last 100 yards, fumbling for my keys. The engine turned over on the first try. Thank God. I threw it in reverse and looked in my rearview mirror. The thing was standing at the edge of the trees, watching me. Just watching. Its human eyes were sad now, almost pleading. Like it wanted to tell me something but couldn't. I floored the gas pedal and got out of there. The drive back to the ranger station should have taken 45 minutes. My watch said it took 12 minutes. The truck's clock said it took 3 hours. The chronometer in my pack, when I checked it later, had stopped completely at 11:41 a.m. I radioed base as soon as I got back to the station. Base, this is Twin Lakes. I need to report an incident. Possible dangerous animal. Over. Ted, this is Sarah at base. What kind of incident? Over. Sarah was the radio operator, been with the Park Service longer than me. Good woman, level-headed, large predator, species unknown, North Shore area. Recommend closing that section to hunters. Over. Copy that. Can you describe the animal? Over. I stared at the radio for a long moment. How do you describe something that breaks the laws of physics? Something that ages plants by touching them? Something with human eyes? Bear-like, extremely large, exhibiting unusual behavior. I'll file a full report. Over. Roger, we'll put out an advisory. Are you injured? Over. Was I injured? I felt like I'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. My hands were shaking, and there was gray in my beard that hadn't been there that morning. But how do you explain that? Negative. Just shaken up. Twin. Lakes out. I spent the rest of the day writing my report, but I couldn't bring myself to include the impossible details. The time distortion, the aging effect, the human eyes. Instead, I wrote about an unusually large and aggressive bear and recommended the area be closed pending investigation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I dozed off, I'd dream about those eyes. Human eyes, full of fear and pain, staring at me from that ancient bear face. Around midnight, I heard scratching at my door. Soft at first, like a raccoon or porcupine, then louder, deliberate. Something with claws was trying to get in. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight, but I didn't open the door. Instead, I looked out the window. Nothing, just darkness and the normal sounds of the forest. But my wall clock had stopped at 12 exactly, and outside, I could hear that deep breathing again. I sat in my chair with the rifle across my lap until dawn. When the sun finally came up, I found scratch marks on my door, deep gouges in the wood, like something massive had been testing to see if it could get in. The scratch marks were old, weathered, like they'd been there for decades. But my door had been unmarked when I'd closed it the night before. The radio crackled at 6 a.m. sharp. Twin Lakes, this is base. We're sending Rodriguez out to assist with the bear situation. He'll be there by noon. Over. Miguel Rodriguez was a good ranger. Young, smart, experienced with dangerous wildlife. Under normal circumstances, I'd have been happy for the backup. But these weren't normal circumstances. Base, I don't think that's necessary. I can handle this alone. Over. Negative, Ted. Protocol requires 2 rangers for dangerous animal incidents. Rodriguez is already on his way. Base out. I tried calling back, but they wouldn't respond. Rodriguez was coming, whether I wanted him there or not. I spent the morning barricading my cabin and checking my weapons. 2 rifles, a shotgun, plenty of ammunition, enough to stop any normal bear. But I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a normal bear hunt. Rodriguez arrived at 11:47 a.m. in his Park Service truck, all smiles and confidence. He was 28 years old, built like a linebacker, and had never met a problem he couldn't solve with hard work and determination. "Hey, Ted," he called out as he climbed out of his truck. "Heard you met our friendly neighborhood monster bear. Ready to bag this thing?" I should have told him to turn around and drive away. Should have broken protocol and ordered him to leave. Should have done anything except what I actually did. Instead, I just said, "Let's gear up and get this over with." That was my second mistake. And it was about to cost Rodriguez everything. Rodriguez was excited about the hunt. Too excited. He'd brought enough gear to outfit a small army. Tranquilizer guns, bear traps, even a portable winch for hauling out a carcass. "So tell me about this bear," he said as we loaded our packs. "How big are we talking? 8 feet? 9? I hesitated. Bigger. 10 feet? Damn, that'd be a record. "Rodriguez, call me Miguel. We're gonna be partners on this one, right?" He was so young, so confident. Looking at him was like looking at myself 20 years ago. Before the wilderness taught me, there were things out there that couldn't be explained, cataloged, or shot. "Miguel," I said carefully, "this isn't a normal bear. I think we should call for more backup, maybe Fish and Wildlife, or, Ted, come on, it's just a big bear. We've both dealt with problem bears before. This one's probably just old and cranky, defending territory." If only it were that simple. We hiked out to Twin Lakes around 1 p.m. The weather was clear, temperature about 40 degrees. Perfect tracking conditions. Miguel was in full ranger mode, pointing out tracks, reading sign, explaining his hunting strategy. "See these claw marks on the bark?" he said, examining a birch tree. "Fresh, maybe 2 days old. This bear's marking territory, letting other animals know this is his turf." I looked at the claw marks. They were 8 feet off the ground and sunk deep into the wood. No normal bear could reach that high or cut that deep. Miguel, those marks means he's a big one. All right, probably stands 11 feet on his hind legs. We'll need to be careful with shot placement. He wasn't listening. Young rangers never did, until the wilderness taught them to. We reached the north shore of Twin Lakes at 2:30 p.m. The place looked different in daylight, peaceful, beautiful. The lake was mirror still, reflecting the mountains and clouds perfectly. Birds were singing. A gentle breeze rustled the aspens. It looked like paradise. Nice spot, Miguel said, setting down his pack. I can see why hunters like it here. Let's set up a base camp and start looking for fresh sign. I checked my watch. 2:32 p.m. The chronometer in my pack showed the same time. Everything normal. For now, we spent the next hour setting up equipment and scouting the area. Miguel found more tracks, massive paw prints in the soft mud near the water's edge. Each print was the size of a dinner plate. Jesus, he whispered, measuring one with his ruler. 14 inches long, 8 inches wide. Ted, this thing's enormous. I told you it was big. Big? This is prehistoric big. Like something from the Ice Age. He was more right than he knew. Around 4 p.m., we heard the breathing. Miguel froze in the middle of examining a scat sample. What the hell is that? That's what I tried to tell you about. The sound was coming from across the lake, deep and rhythmic. But it wasn't quite an animal sound. More like wind blowing through a cave, if caves could breathe. Some kind of mating call? Miguel asked, but his voice had lost its confidence. I don't think. The breathing stopped. The forest went dead quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even the lake seemed to stop moving. Miguel's watch alarm beeped, 4:15 p.m., but my watch showed 4:03 p.m. Miguel, I said quietly, what time do you have? He checked his watch, 4:15. Why? I showed him mine. 4:03. He laughed, but it was forced. One of our watches is running fast. Or slow. Happens all the time in the field. Check your watch again. He looked down. The laugh died on his face. 4:16, he said. But your watch still shows 4:03? Yeah, that's impossible. Welcome to Twin Lakes. The ripples started then. Same as before, deliberate circles moving across the still water. But this time, they were bigger, more of them. Like something massive was stirring in the depths. Miguel grabbed his binoculars. I can see something moving down there. Deep. Maybe 30 feet down. We need to leave. Now. Are you kidding? This is incredible. Whatever's down there, it's huge. Could be a new species. Young ranger. Still thought everything could be explained by science. The thing surfaced, not all at once. First just the top of its head, then its eyes, then its massive shoulders. It was even bigger than I'd remembered. Ancient beyond description, with fur so old and matted it looked like moss. But it was the eyes that made Miguel drop his binoculars. Human eyes, terrified human eyes, staring right at us. What is that? Miguel whispered. What the hell is that? The thing began wading toward shore. Each step it took, the water around it turned dark. Not muddy, dark, old dark. Like the water itself was aging. Run, I said, but, run. We ran. But Miguel was carrying too much gear, and the thing was fast, impossibly fast. It would be behind us, then beside us, then in front of us, moving through space like space didn't matter. Miguel stumbled, and his pack spilled open. Equipment scattered across the ground, radio, first aid kit, flare gun. Leave it, I shouted. But Miguel was a by-the-book ranger. He stopped to gather his gear. The thing reached him before I could stop it. I watched Miguel Rodriguez age 80 years in 10 seconds. His dark hair went gray, then white, then fell out. His skin wrinkled and spotted. His strong young body bent and withered. His eyes stayed the same wide and terrified right until the end. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as an old man's wheeze. Then he crumpled to dust. The thing looked at me across Miguel's remains. Its human eyes were sad again, almost apologetic. Like it hadn't wanted to do what it just did. But it was still moving toward me. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. Crashing through underbrush, leaping over fallen logs. Not caring about direction or safety. Just running from something that could steal my entire life with a touch. Behind me, I could hear it following. Not chasing, following. Patient. Like it had all the time in the world. Because it did. I made it back to my truck, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. The thing emerged from the tree line just as the engine finally started. This time, I didn't look back. I drove straight to the main ranger station, 90 miles away, and told them Rodriguez was dead. Bear attack. His body was unrecoverable. They asked for details. I gave them what I could without mentioning the impossible parts. Large predator, surprise attack, nothing we could have done. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? I was a 19-year veteran with a spotless record. But when the recovery team went back to Twin Lakes the next day, they found something that made everyone nervous. Miguel's equipment was scattered around the North Shore, just like I'd described. But his body wasn't there. What they found instead was the skeleton of an elderly man, ancient bones, yellowed with age, wearing the torn remains of a Park Service uniform. The dental records matched Miguel Rodriguez. But according to those bones, Miguel Rodriguez had been dead for at least 50 years. They closed Twin Lakes after that. The official reason was environmental hazard, possible radioactive contamination. The Park Service told the media that old military tests from World War II might have left dangerous materials in the area. It was a lie, but it was a lie that kept people away. For 2 weeks, I tried to forget what I'd seen. I filed reports, attended debriefings, and went through the motions of being a normal park ranger. But every night, I dreamed about Miguel turning to dust, and those human eyes watching from an ancient bear face. On October 15th, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back. I told my supervisor I was taking personal leave to visit family in Seattle. Instead, I drove back to Twin Lakes with a truck full of specialized equipment. If I was going to face this thing again, I was going to be prepared. I brought cameras with high-speed film, a military-grade radio with extended range, flares, emergency supplies, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. But most importantly, I brought 3 atomic chronometers, the most accurate timepieces the Park Service could provide. If this thing was manipulating time, I wanted to document exactly how. I set up camp on the south shore of the lake, as far as possible from where Miguel had died. The atomic chronometers were synchronized and placed in different locations around my campsite. If time distortion was local, maybe I could map its boundaries. The first 2 days were completely normal. No strange breathing, no ripples in the water, no time anomalies. Just peaceful wilderness and the normal sounds of October in Alaska. I almost convinced myself that whatever had been here was gone. On the 3rd day, I found the cave. It was hidden behind a waterfall on the east side of the lake, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. The opening was just big enough for a person to squeeze through, but inside, it opened up into a vast cavern. And the cavern was full of bones. Human bones, arranged in neat piles. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. But these weren't ancient Native American remains or forgotten miners. These bones were recent, some still had flesh attached. Others were so old they crumbled when I touched them. All the skulls had the same expression of terror frozen on their faces. In the center of the cavern was a natural pool of water, connected to the lake by an underground channel. And floating in that pool was something that made my blood freeze. It was a man, or what had once been a man. Naked, pale, floating face up with his eyes open. He looked like he was in his 30s, maybe 40. Athletic build, short brown hair, modern dental work. But he'd been floating in that pool for decades, maybe centuries. The water around him had stopped aging him somehow, keeping him preserved but conscious. I could see his eyes tracking my movement. He was alive, aware, and absolutely terrified. That's when I understood what I was really dealing with. The thing that had killed Miguel wasn't a creature that manipulated time. It was a creature that existed outside of time. And this cave was where it brought its victims, not to kill them, but to feed on their temporal energy slowly, keeping them alive and aware for as long as possible. The man in the pool tried to speak, but only bubbles came out. He'd been drowning for decades without being allowed to die. I heard movement behind me and spun around. The bear thing was standing at the cave entrance, blocking my way out. Up close, I could see details I'd missed before. The matted fur was actually clothing ancient leather and hide, that had fused with its body over the centuries. And the human eyes weren't just human-like. They were actually human eyes, transplanted or grafted into a bear's skull. This thing had once been a man who'd found a way to extend his life by stealing time from others, but the process had twisted him into something inhuman. "You understand now," it said. Its voice was human, but ancient, like dust and wind and the whisper of centuries. "You're not a bear," I said. "I was a trapper. 1847. Found this place during a hard winter. The water here, it doesn't follow normal rules. I drank from it, trying to survive the cold. It gave me time, all the time I wanted. But it changed you. Everything has a price. The water gave me immortality, but it required payment. Time stolen from others, life force drained from the living. The man in the pool was making desperate gestures, trying to warn me about something. But I couldn't look away from the creature's human eyes. "How many?" I asked. "Hundreds, thousands. I've lost count. Native hunters, gold miners, trappers, tourists, and now park rangers. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired." Theodore Nightwind. "So very tired. I've been alone with these voices for over a century." He gestured toward the pool and the bone piles. "They never stop screaming, you know. In here." He tapped his skull with one massive claw. "All of them, begging to die." "Then let them die. Let yourself die." "I can't. The water won't let me. It needs a replacement first. Someone to take over the feeding. Someone to become the next guardian of this place." I understood then why he'd been following me, why he'd killed Miguel in front of me instead of just taking us both. He wasn't hunting for food. He was hunting for a replacement. "I won't do it," I said. "You will, because if you don't, I'll visit your ranger stations one by one. I'll age every person you've ever worked with. Every friend, every colleague, every innocent hiker who comes into these mountains. I'll drain them all until you agree to take my place." The chronometers in my pack were clicking rapidly, their mechanisms struggling to track time in this place where time had no meaning. "There's another option," I said. "What?" I pulled the pin on a white phosphorus flare and threw it into the pool. The water exploded into steam and fire. The man in the pool finally, mercifully, died. And the creature that had once been a trapper screamed not with his voice, but with the voices of every person he'd ever killed. The cave began to collapse. I ran for the entrance as rocks fell around me. The creature tried to follow, but the phosphorus fire was spreading, and something about the chemical reaction was disrupting whatever force had kept this place stable. I made it out just as the entire cavern system imploded, taking the pool, the bones, and the creature with it. But I didn't escape unchanged. The rescue team found me 3 days later, unconscious on the shore of Twin Lakes. According to their medical examination, I'd aged 15 years overnight. My hair was gray, my face was lined with wrinkles, and my joints ached like an old man's. But I was alive. The official report stated that I'd suffered exposure and altitude sickness while conducting unauthorized research into the Rodriguez incident. The mysterious aging was attributed to severe dehydration and stress. The collapsed cave system was blamed on a minor earthquake. No one believed me when I tried to tell them the truth. How could they? The story was impossible, and I had no proof. The atomic chronometers had been destroyed in the cave-in, and the photographs I'd taken showed nothing but blurry images of rocks and shadows. They retired me on medical disability 6 months later. "Too old for field work," they said. "Premature aging due to job stress." If only they knew. I moved to a small cabin outside Anchorage, where I spent my remaining years writing down everything that had happened at Twin Lakes, every detail, every impossible moment, every horror I'd witnessed. Twin Lakes remained closed to the public, but not because of radioactive contamination. The Park Service knew something dangerous was there, even if they couldn't explain what. Sometimes, late at night, they still received radio transmissions from the area. Voices calling for help. Voices that sounded like Miguel Rodriguez. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. 30 years later, I destroyed the creature, but I don't think I destroyed the source of its power. That water, that pool in the cave, it was connected to the lake by underground channels. When I used the phosphorus flare, I might have disrupted the creature's ability to feed, but I didn't destroy the temporal anomaly itself. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can still hear that deep breathing. Patient, waiting. Last month, I got a letter from the current park superintendent. Twin Lakes is being reopened to the public next spring. Budget cuts, they say. Can't afford to keep a perfectly good recreational area closed forever, based on unsubstantiated safety concerns. They're planning to rebuild the North Shore campground. Right where Miguel died, right where I saw something impossible steal the life from a good man in 10 terrible seconds. I tried to call them, tried to explain the danger. But I'm just a crazy old ex-ranger with a medical file full of stress-related disorders and premature aging. They thanked me politely for my concerns and hung up. So I'm writing this down as a warning, for whoever finds it, for whoever might listen. Twin Lakes isn't safe. It never was, and it never will be. Something lives in those waters that doesn't follow the rules of our world. Something that feeds on time itself. And I think it's still hungry. My name is Theodore Nightwind. I was a park ranger for 19 years, until I met something that time forgot. If you're reading this, stay away from Twin Lakes. No matter what the Park Service tells you about safety improvements or environmental cleanup, some places should stay closed, some hungers should stay unfed, and some mysteries are better left buried under 1,000 tons of collapsed stone. But if you do go there, if curiosity or duty or simple bad luck takes you to those black waters, remember this. Time is not your friend at Twin Lakes. And something there is counting every second you have left. My name is Victoria Blackwood, but everyone calls me Vic. I'm a park ranger at Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, and I need to tell you what really happened at Exit Glacier in June 1978. They found me buried in ice for 3 days, more dead than alive, clutching my partner's severed hand. The doctors said I was talking backwards, telling the story from end to beginning. Maybe that's how your mind works when something impossible tries to kill you. I'm telling this story backwards because that's how I remember it. When you almost die, when you see things that can't exist, your brain scrambles everything up like a broken movie reel. So we'll start at the end and work our way back to the beginning, back to when I still thought the world made sense. I've been a ranger here for 8 years now. Before that, I taught rock climbing down in Colorado. I came to Alaska because I wanted something real, something that mattered. Saving people who got lost or hurt in the mountains felt like important work. I was good at it too. I could rappel down a cliff face or navigate a glacier field better than most men twice my size. The Kenai Peninsula is beautiful country, but it's dangerous. We get maybe 4 months of good weather, and even then, the mountains can kill you if you're not careful. Exit Glacier sits about 12 miles outside of Seward, a river of ice flowing down from the Harding ice field. Most tourists stay on the marked trails, take their pictures, and go home with stories about Alaska's wild beauty. But some people want more than pictures. They want to climb the glacier, to test themselves against something ancient and deadly. That's how we make our living in the rescue business. Every summer brings new climbers who think they can handle Alaska. Most of them make it home fine, some don't. My partner was Tom Brennan, 28 years old, from Minnesota. He'd been working with me for 2 years, ever since he got out of the Army. Good climber, steady head, never panicked in a tight spot. We made a solid team. He had this habit of making jokes when things got scary, which happened more often than you'd think. The Dena'ina people have stories about these mountains that go back hundreds of years. They used to live here before the Russians came, before Alaska became American territory. Old Pete Nikolai, who worked maintenance at the visitor center, would tell anyone who'd listen about the glacier shepherds, things that lived in the ice and hunted people. Most of us laughed it off. Ancient stories, old superstitions from a different time. I never believed those stories. I'm a practical person. I believe in what I can see, what I can touch, what makes logical sense. Bears are real. Avalanches are real. Hypothermia is real. Ghost stories are just that. Stories. On June 15th, 1978, we got a call from the state police. A climbing team from Seattle had missed their check-in. 4 experienced climbers, led by a guy named Marcus Webb. They'd registered for a 5-day glacier expedition and were supposed to report back 3 days ago. Their families were worried. The weather had been good, no storms, no unusual conditions. There was no reason for them to be late. Tom and I packed our gear that morning like we'd done 100 times before. Ropes, ice axes, emergency shelter, first aid kit, radio equipment, standard search and rescue loadout. We figured we'd find them stuck somewhere, maybe dealing with an injury or broken equipment. It happens more than you'd think. Mountains have a way of making simple problems complicated. The helicopter dropped us at their last known coordinates, about 6 miles up the glacier from the main trail. The plan was simple: follow their route, look for signs, find them, and get them home safe. We expected to be back at base camp by evening. Tom was in good spirits that morning. He kept making jokes about the glacier ghosts Pete talked about. Maybe the ice monsters got them, he said, grinning as he checked his rope. Maybe we'll find them frozen solid, preserved like cavemen for the next ice age. I wish he'd been wrong. The morning was perfect for glacier work. Clear skies, good visibility, temperature just below freezing. The kind of day that makes you remember why you love this job. We could see for miles across the ice field, the white expanse stretching toward distant peaks. It was beautiful and peaceful, the kind of quiet you only find in wild places. We started up their planned route, following the GPS coordinates they'd filed with the ranger station. The glacier looked normal, the usual mix of solid ice and hidden cracks that you learn to read after years of practice. But something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The ice was too quiet. Usually you hear things on a glacier: the groaning of ice settling, the trickle of meltwater, the crack of shifting snow. But this ice was silent, like it was, holding its breath. That should have been our first warning. 3 days before they found me half dead in that crevasse, Tom and I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about the world. We'd been following the climbing team's route for about 2 hours when we found their first camp. The campsite was wrong, all wrong. Their tent was still standing, but it was partially buried in fresh snow that couldn't have fallen naturally. The snow was packed too evenly, too deliberately. It looked like someone had shoveled it there. "That's weird," Tom said, kneeling beside the tent. "Look at this." The tent stakes were still in the ground, but they were driven deeper than necessary, like someone had hammered them down with enormous force. The fabric wasn't torn or damaged, just buried. Inside, we found their sleeping bags neatly arranged, personal items organized in a way that didn't match normal camping behavior. Maybe they had to leave in a hurry. I said, but I didn't believe it. When climbers abandon camp suddenly, they grab essential gear. These guys had left everything behind, including expensive equipment you never abandon in the wilderness. Tom found the first set of tracks 20 feet from the tent. They were human footprints in the snow, but they were too big, too deep, size 14 boots at least, which would make sense if one of the climbers was particularly large. But these prints showed someone walking without the careful steps you use on glacier ice. No testing the ground, no rope marks, no ice axe holes for balance. "Big guy," Tom said, measuring the print with his hand. "Must be Webb. But why is he walking around without safety gear?" We followed the tracks across a flat section of glacier. They led straight toward an area of broken ice, where crevasses ran like scars through the glacier's surface. Any experienced climber would have roped up before entering that terrain. The tracks showed no sign of caution. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "No one walks into a crevasse field alone." The tracks ended at the edge of a deep crack in the ice, but they didn't stop where a normal person would stop. They went right to the edge and disappeared, like whoever made them had walked straight into the void. Tom lowered himself partway into the crevasse on a rope, his headlamp beam dancing across the blue-white ice walls. "Nothing down here," he called up. "But Vic, you need to see this." He came back up excited and confused. "There's another set of tracks down there, on the bottom. Same size boots, but these ones are coming back out. And there's something else. The ice down there is carved, like deliberately shaped. There are handholds cut into the walls, steps carved out. Someone's been modifying this crevasse." That's when we found the second campsite. It was hidden in a depression behind a wall of broken ice. Invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. This camp was different from the first one. The tent was gone, but there were clear signs that 4 people had spent time here. 4 sleeping areas marked in the snow, arranged in a perfect circle. A fire pit dug into the ice, which should have been impossible since glacier ice doesn't burn. But the strangest thing was the food. Their supplies were arranged in neat piles, sorted by type. Canned goods in one pile, dried foods in another, personal items in a third. But someone had opened every container and removed exactly half of each item. Half the trail mix, half the canned soup, half the coffee. The removed portions were nowhere to be found. It's like someone was taking inventory, Tom said. Like they were rationing it. Above the campsite, carved into the ice wall, was a series of marks I didn't recognize. Not letters or numbers, but deliberate scratches arranged in patterns. They looked fresh, like someone had carved them recently with a sharp tool. Tom took pictures of everything while I tried to make sense of what we were seeing. The tracks from this camp led further up the glacier, toward the more dangerous terrain near the ice field's edge. But these tracks were different. Instead of the deep, careless prints we'd found earlier, these showed 4 people walking in single file, very close together, like they were roped together or being led. Maybe they ran into another climbing party, Tom suggested. Maybe someone helped them when they got in trouble. But I was starting to feel something cold in my stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. The way the food was arranged, the carved symbols, the tracks leading toward danger instead of safety, none of it felt like rescue behavior. We followed the trail for another hour. The tracks led us across increasingly dangerous terrain, through areas where the glacier ice was fractured and unstable. No experienced guide would take clients through this route. It was like watching someone deliberately lead people into danger. The tracks ended at another crevasse, this one deeper and wider than the first. But this time, we could see something at the bottom. Tom rappelled down while I anchored the rope. His voice echoed up from the depths, tight with confusion and growing fear. "Vic, there's something down here, some kind of cave. The ice has been carved out, like a room. And there are things stored here, food, equipment, and Vic." "What?" "There's more than one set of climbing gear down here. This isn't just our missing team. There are packs and gear from other expeditions. Some of this stuff looks old, like it's been here for years." That's when we heard the sound. It started low, like the groan of shifting ice, but it had a rhythm to it, almost like singing, but deeper than any human voice should be. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the ice walls and snowfields around us. Tom came up fast, his face pale under his winter tan. "We need to get out of here, now." But as we packed our gear, I realized we might already be too late. New tracks had appeared in the snow around our position, circling us like a predator checking its prey. Size 14 boots, walking without fear across dangerous ice. And the singing was getting closer. 2 days before they dug me out of the ice, Tom Brennan died saving my life, and I learned that some things are worse than death. After we heard the singing, we tried to radio base camp. Nothing but static. Our GPS unit was working, but the radio was completely dead, like something was jamming the signal. We were 6 miles from the nearest marked trail, in terrain that would take hours to cross safely. "We stick to the plan," I told Tom. "Find the missing climbers, get everyone out together." But the tracks we'd been following changed direction. Instead of continuing up the glacier toward the ice field, they turned east, toward a section of broken ice that wasn't on any of our maps. The terrain there was too unstable for normal climbing, too dangerous for anyone to attempt without specialized equipment. The new tracks showed the 4 missing climbers walking in that direction, but now there were additional prints mixed in with theirs. The size 14 boots, but also something else. Prints that were almost human, but too wide, too deep, like something much heavier than any person was walking on 2 legs. We found Marcus Webb hanging upside down in a crevasse, a quarter-mile from the last campsite. He was alive, barely. Hypothermic, delirious, but breathing. Tom rappelled down to get him while I secured the anchor points. Webb had been suspended there for at least 12 hours, his climbing rope tied around his ankles, dangling like bait in a trap. When we pulled him up, he kept talking about the shepherd. He said it over and over. Between chattering teeth and blue lips, "The shepherd found us. It's keeping us. It knows. We're here." Webb died while we were trying to warm him up. His last words were a warning. It's hurting us, like sheep to slaughter. Don't let it take you to the ice room. That's when Tom and I both realized we were being hunted. The singing started again, closer this time. But now we could hear that it wasn't really singing at all. It was a sound like wind through ice caves, like the groaning of a glacier under pressure, but shaped into patterns that almost sounded like music. And underneath it, something that might have been breathing. We decided to make for the nearest marked trail, abandoning the search for the other 3 climbers. Webb was dead, we had no radio contact, and something was tracking us across the glacier. Every rule of wilderness rescue said to get out and call for backup. But the ice had other plans. Every route we tried to take led us back toward the broken terrain where we'd found Webb. It was like the glacier itself was shifting, blocking our escape routes. Paths that had been clear an hour earlier were now blocked by fresh ice falls. Crevasses appeared where solid ice had been before. This is impossible, Tom said, staring at his compass. We've been walking south for 2 hours. We should have hit the main trail by now. The compass needle was spinning slowly, like it couldn't find magnetic north. Our GPS showed our position jumping around randomly, sometimes placing us miles from where we actually were. That's when we saw the ice room. It was built into the side of a crevasse, carved out of the glacier wall, like a natural cave, but clearly shaped by intelligence. The opening was hidden behind hanging ice that formed a kind of doorway. Inside, we could see stored equipment, food supplies, and something else that made my blood freeze. Bodies. Not decomposed, not skeletal, but perfectly preserved in the ice. Men and women in climbing gear from different time periods, some wearing modern equipment, others in older gear that looked like it was from the 1960 seconds or earlier. They were arranged along the walls like stored meat in a freezer. Jesus Christ, Tom whispered. How many people has this thing taken? I counted at least 12 bodies that I could see, maybe more in the deeper sections of the cave. All of them looked like they had just fallen asleep. The ice had preserved them completely, keeping them fresh like they were waiting for something. And in the center of the room, arranged like a dinner table, were the personal belongings of dozens of climbing expeditions. Watches, cameras, wedding rings, identification cards, trophies collected over years, maybe decades. Tom grabbed my arm. Vic, we need to leave. Now. But it was too late. The shepherd had found us. It came up from a deeper crevasse behind the ice room, climbing the vertical walls like gravity didn't apply to it. At first glance, it looked almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, walking upright. But it was too big, too wide, covered in thick, dark fur that was frosted with ice. Its hands ended in claws that could grip the ice like steel pythons. The thing's face was the worst part. Almost human, but stretched wrong, with eyes that were too large and too intelligent. It looked at us like a farmer looks at livestock, calculating and patient. When it spoke, the sound came from deep in its chest, like rocks grinding together. New sheep, it said, the words barely recognizable. Fresh meat for winter store. Tom tried to run, but the thing was faster than anything that size should be. It moved across the broken ice like it was solid ground, cutting off our escape route with casual ease. When Tom tried to climb down into a crevasse to get away, the creature simply reached down and plucked him out like picking fruit from a tree. I watched my partner try to fight something that was stronger than any animal I'd ever seen. Tom had his ice axe out, swinging at the creature's arms and face, but the blade just bounced off like it was hitting stone. The thing handled him gently, almost carefully, like it didn't want to damage the meat. Vic, Tom screamed as the creature carried him toward the ice room. Don't let it take you alive. Whatever you do, don't. The shepherd's claws went through Tom's chest like he was made of paper. But even then, it was careful. It killed him quickly, efficiently, then began the process of preparing the body for storage. I ran. I ran across broken ice, through snowfields, over crevasses I should never have been able to cross. Behind me, I could hear the creature following, but not hurrying. It knew the glacier, knew every path and hiding place. It was herding me, driving me toward whatever trap it had prepared. The singing started again, but now I understood what it was. The shepherd was calling to others like it, telling them that new meat was available, that the hunt was almost over. I found myself back at Webb's crevasse, the place where we'd found him hanging like bait. But now I could see the trap clearly. The creature had arranged everything, positioned Webb where we would find him, knowing that rescuers would come looking. We weren't saving anyone, we were the next course. One day before my rescue, I learned the truth about the shepherd, and discovered that some hunts have been going on for longer than human memory. After I watched the creature kill Tom, I did the only thing I could do. I kept running. But the shepherd wasn't chasing me anymore. It was guiding me, driving me like a sheepdog moves livestock. Every time I tried to go in one direction, I'd find a fresh icefall blocking my path or a crevasse that hadn't been there before. The creature was manipulating the glacier itself, reshaping the ice to control where I could go. I ended up in a section of the glacier I'd never seen before, even though I'd been working this area for 8 years. The ice here was different, older, bluer, carved into shapes that looked almost like buildings. And everywhere I looked, there were bones. Not scattered randomly like you'd expect from animal kills, but arranged in patterns, sorted by size, stacked in neat piles, cleaned and organized like inventory in a warehouse. Human bones mixed with caribou, mountain goat, and things I couldn't identify. The shepherd had been hunting here for a very long time. That's when I found the journal. It was wrapped in oiled canvas, tucked into a crack in the ice wall where someone had tried to hide it. The leather cover was stained and frozen, but the pages inside were readable. The handwriting was old-fashioned, careful, like someone had learned penmanship in a different century. The first entry was dated July 15th, 1892. Asterisk, day 12 in the ice fields. The Tlingit guides refuse to go further. They speak of Kushta, the land otter man who steals people from the ice. I believed this to be primitive superstition, until yesterday when we found Hendrix hanging in the crevasse. Something had arranged his body deliberately, positioned him where we would find him. The tracks around the site were not made by any animal known to science. Asterisk, I flipped through pages of increasingly desperate entries. The journal belonged to a geological survey team from 1892, led by someone named Dr. Edmund Cartwright. They'd come to map the glacier system and study ice formations. Instead, they'd encountered the shepherd. Asterisk, July 20th. Patterson is missing. We found his camp abandoned, but his supplies were sorted and redistributed in a manner that suggests intelligence. Something is managing us like livestock. It knows our needs, our weaknesses. It's learning how we think. Asterisk, July 25th. We found the ice rooms today. Dear God, how many people has this thing taken? Bodies preserved like specimens, sorted by size and condition. Some still wearing clothing I recognize from expeditions that disappeared years. And the creature is farming us. Asterisk. The final entry was barely legible, written in a shaking hand. Asterisk. August 2nd. I am the last. The creature took Williams this morning. I can hear it singing outside my shelter. It knows I'm here, but it's waiting. It wants me to understand before it takes me. We are not its prey. We are its herd. It has been shepherding humans through these mountains for centuries, taking some, letting others go, maintaining the population. We are livestock that doesn't know it's being farmed. Asterisk. Below that, in different ink, someone had added a final note. Asterisk. The Dena'ina people knew. They called it the shepherd of the ice. Their stories weren't superstitions, they were warnings. Asterisk. I understood then why the creature had let me run, why it wasn't hurrying to catch me. It wasn't hunting me, it was teaching me, showing me the scope of its operation, the intelligence behind what looked like random killings. The shepherd wanted me to understand what I was dealing with before it added me to its collection. But understanding gave me something the shepherd hadn't expected, knowledge of how it operated. The creature appeared while I was reading the journal, rising from a crevasse like it had been waiting underground. In daylight, without the fear clouding my vision, I could see it more clearly. It was huge, maybe 8 feet tall and built like a bear, but it moved with purpose and intelligence that no animal possessed. Read the old words, it said in that grinding voice. Learn the truth. You understand now. You've been doing this for over a century, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Much longer, the ice remembers. The old people knew to stay away, but new people keep coming. Soft people who don't understand the mountain's rules. The creature gestured toward the ice rooms with one massive clawed hand. I keep them fresh. I keep them safe. They feed me through the hard months when other food is gone. The climbing expeditions that disappear, you arrange it. I guide them to the ice. I teach them to fear. Fear makes the meat tender. Some I take, some I send away to bring others. The survivors tell stories, and the stories bring more sheep to the mountain. I realized then that every climbing accident in the area, every mysterious disappearance, had been orchestrated. The shepherd wasn't just a predator, it was a rancher. It had been managing the human population in these mountains for generations, taking enough to feed itself, but leaving enough survivors to maintain the supply. What do you want from me? The creature tilted its massive head, considering. You are strong. You know the mountain. You could help guide the sheep to better ice, safer harvesting. It was offering to make me its partner. I could teach you the old ways, it continued. Show you how to read the ice, how to shape it. You could live longer than the soft people. Much longer. The journal had mentioned that some early explorers had simply vanished without a trace, their bodies never found. I wondered now if they had accepted similar offers, if there were human helpers working with the shepherd, people who had traded their humanity for survival. The creature took a step closer, and I could smell the ancient cold that surrounded it, ice and death and patient hunger. Choose now, it said, be meat or be shepherd. I made my choice by diving into the nearest crevasse. They found me 3 days later, buried under ice that had collapsed into the crevasse where I'd taken shelter. Hypothermic, delusional, clutching Tom's severed hand that the shepherd had thrown down after me like a final insult. The official report said that Tom and I had encountered a section of unstable glacier ice during our search for the missing Seattle climbing team. The ice fall that killed Tom and trapped me was listed as a natural geological event, unfortunate but not unusual, for the area. The 4 missing climbers were never found, presumed lost to crevasse falls and adverse weather conditions. The area around Exit Glacier was quietly redesignated as geologically unstable and closed to independent climbing expeditions. New regulations required all climbing parties to use approved guides and stick to established routes. No one was allowed to camp overnight on the glacier without special permits that were almost never granted. Old Pete Nikolai visited me in the hospital while I was recovering. He brought traditional tea made from fireweed and devil's club, and he didn't act surprised when I told him the real story. My grandfather's grandfather knew about the shepherd, he said quietly. We have stories going back 10 generations. The ice thing has always been there, always hunting. But it got worse after the gold rush brought so many outsiders to the mountains. Pete explained that the Dena'ina had treaties with the shepherd, old agreements, that kept it contained to certain areas of the glacier. But as more tourists and climbers came to Alaska, the creature had expanded its territory, adapted its methods. Your people don't listen to the old warnings, Pete said. They think our stories are just legends, but some legends are instructions for staying alive. I spent 6 months on medical leave, officially recovering from severe frostbite and trauma. Unofficially, I was trying to decide whether to go back to work or transfer to a different park, somewhere without ancient predators managing human populations like livestock. In the end, I stayed. Someone had to know the truth about what was really happening in those mountains. Someone had to watch for the signs, to look for the patterns that marked the shepherd's activities. I learned to read the missing person reports differently, to spot the disappearances that didn't follow normal lost hiker patterns. When climbing parties went missing in the Exit Glacier area, I made sure the search teams knew to avoid certain routes, certain ice formations that looked safe but weren't. Most importantly, I made sure the Dena'ina stories were recorded properly, filed with the Park Service as legitimate safety information rather than dismissed as folklore. Future rangers would have access to the real history of these mountains, even if they didn't believe it. But sometimes, on clear winter nights, when the glacier ice sings in the wind, I hear something else mixed in with the natural sounds. A low calling, patient and persistent, like a rancher checking on his herds. The shepherd is still out there. Still hunting, still farming, still waiting for the next group of soft people who think they can challenge the mountain without understanding its rules. And every year, new climbers come to Alaska, drawn by stories of wilderness, adventure, and natural beauty. They file their permits, check the weather reports, pack their modern equipment, and head up into the ice fields with confidence that technology and preparation can keep them safe. Most of them come back with amazing photos and stories of conquest over nature. But some don't come back at all, and in the official reports, they're always listed as climbing accidents. My name is Gabriel Thornfield. Most people call me Gabe. I've been a park ranger for 9 years now, and I love my job more than anything else in the world. I work at Kobuk Valley National Park in Alaska, way up north where most folks never go. It's a strange place, sand dunes in the middle of the Arctic, like someone dropped a piece of the Sahara Desert into the frozen wilderness. I'm not just any ranger though. I studied plants in college, became what they call a botanist. The Park Service sent me here because the Kobuk sand dunes are special. They're the only place like this in the whole Arctic. Warm sand surrounded by cold tundra and mountains. The plants that grow here don't grow anywhere else on Earth. That's my job, to study them, protect them, and try to understand how they survive in such a weird place. July 1988 was supposed to be my best summer yet. The weather was perfect, warm and sunny almost every day. The dunes stretched out like golden waves, 30 square miles of sand that felt hot under my boots even in Alaska. I had a research partner that year, Dr. Sarah Kim from the University of Alaska. She was smart, maybe the smartest person I'd ever met, and she knew more about plant diseases than anyone I'd worked with. Sarah arrived at my ranger station on July 3rd. She was small and quiet, with thick black hair always pulled back in a ponytail. She wore round glasses that made her look like a librarian, but she could hike 20 miles without getting tired. We got along great from the start. "This place is amazing, Gabe," she said on her first morning, looking out at the dunes. "I can't believe plants can grow in pure sand like this." I handed her a cup of coffee and pointed toward the strange patterns we could see from our cabin porch. "That's what I want to show you. Look at how the plants are growing." Even from a distance, you could see something wasn't right. The vegetation wasn't scattered randomly like it should be. Instead, it formed perfect circles and straight lines, like someone had planted them on purpose. But nobody lived out here. Nobody ever came here except me and the occasional scientist. "Have you seen patterns like this before?" Sarah asked, adjusting her glasses. "Never," I said, "and I've been studying these dunes for 5 years. This is new." We spent that first week hiking out to different pattern sites, taking pictures and collecting samples. The work was harder than usual because the plants seemed different somehow, thicker, more tangled together than normal. Several times, we had to use machetes to cut through vegetation that shouldn't have been dense enough to block our path. The patterns were everywhere once we started looking. Perfect spirals of Arctic poppies, straight lines of grass that stretched for hundreds of yards, circles of moss so exact they looked like they'd been drawn with a compass, and always, at the center of each pattern, the plants grew thicker and stranger than anywhere else. "This is impossible," Sarah said on our 4th day out. We were standing in the middle of a spiral pattern, about 50 feet across. Plants don't grow like this. There's no natural process that could create geometry this perfect. I knelt down and touched the ground at the center of the spiral. The sand felt different. Here, cooler, more damp. When I dug down a few inches, the sand underneath was almost black. "Look at this." I called Sarah over. "The soil composition is completely different." She knelt beside me and took a sample of the dark sand. As soon as she touched it, she jerked her hand back. "It's warm," she said, frowning, "warmer than the surface sand." That night, back at the station, we looked at the dark sand under Sarah's microscope. What we saw didn't make sense. Mixed in with normal sand and plant roots was something else, tiny thread-like structures that moved when we watched them. They were too small to see clearly, but they definitely weren't normal plant material. "Fungus, maybe?" Sarah suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. "I've never seen fungus that moves like that," I said. The threads seemed to pulse, like they had tiny heartbeats. Sarah carefully collected several samples in sealed containers. "I'll run some tests tomorrow," she said. "Maybe we can figure out what these things are." But something was bothering me as we locked up the samples for the night. Sarah had been touching the dark sand all day, and now she kept rubbing her hands together like they itched. When I asked if she was okay, she just smiled and said she was tired. I went to bed that night, thinking about the patterns in the dunes. In my 9 years as a ranger, I'd seen nature do incredible things, but I'd never seen anything that looked so much like intelligence behind it, like something was planning and designing and building. I had no idea that something was about to start building inside Sarah. The next morning, Sarah was already awake when I got up. That was strange. She usually slept until at least 8, but I found her sitting at the lab table at 6 a.m., staring at the microscope. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, making coffee. She didn't answer right away. When she finally looked up, her eyes seemed unfocused. "The threads," she said slowly. "They're not fungus." I walked over to look. Under the microscope, the tiny moving structures were much clearer now. They looked almost like very thin worms, but they moved too fast and too purposefully to be any parasite I knew. "What do you think they are?" I asked. Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she finally said. "But Gabe, I think they're trying to communicate." That sounded crazy, but when I looked through the microscope again, I could see what she meant. The threads weren't just moving randomly. They formed shapes, held those shapes for a few seconds, then formed new ones. Triangles, squares, spirals, the same geometric patterns we'd seen in the dunes. "We need to contact the university," I said. "This is way beyond anything we're qualified to handle." But Sarah shook her head. "Not yet. Let me run a few more tests first. If we're wrong about this, we'll look like idiots." I didn't like it, but she was the scientist. I agreed to give her 2 more days before calling for help. That afternoon, things started going wrong. We hiked back out to the spiral pattern to collect more samples. But when we got there, something had changed. The pattern was bigger, at least 10 feet wider than it had been the day before. And the plants in the center were different. Taller, darker, twisted together in ways that hurt to look at. "Plants don't grow this fast," I said, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. Sarah walked straight to the center of the pattern and knelt down. Before I could stop her, she plunged both hands into the dark sand up to her wrists. "Sarah, don't!" I shouted, running toward her. She looked up at me with a strange smile. "It's okay, Gabe. They're friendly." The way she said, "they," made my skin crawl. I grabbed her arms and pulled her hands out of the sand. Her skin was covered in the tiny threads, thousands of them crawling up her arms like living tattoos. Jesus Christ! I started brushing them off, but they stuck to her skin like they had roots. "It doesn't hurt," Sarah said calmly. "Actually, it feels good, like they're fixing something inside me." I dragged her away from the pattern and back to the ranger station. All the way back, she kept talking about how the threads were helping her and teaching her things. When we got to the station, I made her wash her arms with hot water and soap until every visible thread was gone. But that night, Sarah started acting really strange. I woke up around midnight to find her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a piece of paper. When I looked, over her shoulder, I saw she'd filled the entire page with numbers. Not random numbers, they were arranged in perfect rows and columns, like some kind of mathematical formula. "Sarah, what are you doing?" She looked up at me, and for just a second, her eyes reflected the light like an animal's. "Calculating," she said. "Calculating what?" "Efficiency ratios for biomass conversion." She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Did you know that human neural tissue is 73% more efficient than plant matter for information storage?" The way she said it made me feel sick. "Sarah, you're scaring me. Maybe we should get you to a doctor." She smiled, but it wasn't Sarah's smile. It was too wide, and it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Gabe. Better than fine. I'm becoming something more." I stayed awake the rest of the night, watching her fill page after page with equations I couldn't understand. When the sun came up, she finally went to sleep. But she slept sitting up in the chair with her eyes open. That's when I decided to call for help. But when I tried to use the radio, nothing happened. The equipment was working fine, but every frequency was filled with the same sound, a low humming noise that seemed to match the rhythm of Sarah's breathing. We were cut off. Just me and whatever Sarah was becoming. On our 3rd day, I woke up to find Sarah standing in the lab, holding one of the sealed sample containers. The container was empty. "Where are the samples?" I asked. She turned around, and I saw that her lips were stained black. "I needed to understand them better," she said, "so I tasted them." "You ate them?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sarah, those could be toxic. We need to get you to a hospital right now." But she just laughed. "Gabe, hospitals can't help me anymore. Nothing can. I'm changing into something wonderful." As she spoke, I could see the tiny threads moving under her skin, creating patterns on her face and neck. Her eyes were completely black now, not just the pupils but the whole eye, like someone had filled them with ink. "You should try it," she said, reaching for another sample container. "It doesn't hurt, it makes everything clear." I backed away from her. "Sarah, this isn't you talking. Something is controlling you." "Nothing is controlling me," she said, and her voice sounded different now, deeper, with weird echoes like multiple people speaking at once. "I am becoming part of something much larger. We are becoming part of something much larger." That's when I realized she was talking about more than just herself. She was talking about me too. I ran outside and locked the lab door behind me. Through the window, I could see Sarah pressing her hands against the glass, still smiling that horrible smile. The threads under her skin were moving faster now, forming spirals and triangles just like the patterns in the dunes. I had to get out of there. I had to find help. But as I looked out at the sand dunes, stretching away in every direction, I realized something that made my blood turn cold. The patterns weren't just in a few spots anymore, they were everywhere. The entire landscape was covered in perfect geometric designs of vegetation, spreading out as far as I could see. Whatever was inside Sarah, it wasn't working alone. And it was much, much bigger than I'd thought. I spent that night in my truck, with the doors locked, trying to figure out what to do. Every time I looked at the ranger station, I could see Sarah moving around inside, but she wasn't moving like a normal person anymore. She was too fluid, too quick, like her joints worked differently now. Around 3 a.m, she came outside. I watched through my truck window as she glided, across the sand toward one of the spiral patterns. When she reached the center, she knelt down and pressed both hands into the dark sand. Immediately, the plants around her began to grow. I could actually see them getting taller and thicker in the moonlight. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I could hear her singing. It wasn't any song I'd ever heard. It wasn't even like human music. It was more like the sound wind makes when it blows through rocks, or the noise water makes when it runs over stones. But somehow, I knew it was a song. And somehow, listening to it made me want to walk out there and join her. I started the truck and drove away as fast as I could. The nearest town was Kotzebue, about 60 miles south. I drove through the night, stopping only when I absolutely had to rest. But every time I stopped, I could hear that singing in the distance, carried on the wind. And every time I heard it, it was a little bit louder, a little bit closer. When I finally reached Kotzebue, I went straight to the police station. The officer on duty was a guy named Jim Colleague who I'd met a few times before. "Gabe," he said when I walked in, "you look terrible. What happened out there?" I tried to explain, but it sounded crazy, even to me. A parasitic organism that took over people's minds, perfect geometric patterns growing in the wilderness. My research partner turning into something inhuman. Jim listened politely, but I could see in his eyes that he thought I'd lost my mind. "Look, Gabe," he said when I finished. "You've been alone out there for weeks. Sometimes isolation can play tricks on your mind. Why don't we call a doctor, get you checked out?" "I'm not crazy," I said. "You have to send someone out there to check on Sarah. She's in trouble." Jim agreed to drive out with me the next morning, mostly to humor me, I think. But when we got to the ranger station, Sarah was gone. The lab had been destroyed from the inside. Equipment was scattered everywhere, and the walls were covered in the same mathematical equations Sarah had been writing. But, worse than that, there were handprints on the walls, hundreds of them, all in that same black substance we'd found in the sand. "What the hell happened here?" Jim whispered. I found a note on my desk in Sarah's handwriting. "Gabe, I've gone back to the source to complete the integration. You should come too. It's beautiful here. You'll understand everything once you let them inside. They're waiting for you in the spirals. They've always been waiting." Jim radioed for backup and a search team. Within a few hours, the ranger station was full of state troopers and search and rescue volunteers. They organized teams to look for Sarah, but I told them not to bother. Whatever Sarah had been, she wasn't human anymore. That night, the search teams came back with impossible news. "The patterns," said the team leader, a grizzled trooper named Martinez. "They're everywhere now, covering hundreds of square miles. And they're all connected, like one giant design covering the entire valley." "Any sign of the missing woman?" Jim asked. Martinez shook his head. "But we found something else. There are people standing in the centers of some of the patterns. Not moving, not responding to us. Just standing there like statues." "How many people?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was going to be bad. "Dozens, maybe more. All of them with their eyes completely black." That's when I realized the truth. Sarah hadn't been the first victim. She'd just been the first one I'd noticed. This thing, whatever it was, had been taking people for weeks, maybe months. Hikers, researchers, other rangers. Anyone who got too close to the patterns. "We need to evacuate the area," I said, "right now, before it spreads." But Martinez shook his head. "Can't do it. We tried to radio headquarters, but all the frequencies are jammed. Same with cell phones and satellite communication. Whatever's out there, it's cutting us off." As if summoned by his words, we heard it, the singing, faint at first, but getting louder. All of us in the room froze as that inhuman melody drifted through the windows. "Nobody goes outside," Martinez ordered. "We locked down until morning." But it was too late. Two of the younger search volunteers were already walking toward the door with blank expressions on their faces. Their eyes weren't black yet, but I could see the threads starting to move under their skin. "Stop them!" I shouted. Martinez and Jim grabbed the volunteers, but they fought back with impossible strength. One of them, a kid who couldn't have weighed more than 150 pounds, threw Jim across the room like he was made of paper. "It's in the air." I realized out loud, the organism. It can survive outside a host long enough to infect new people. The volunteers broke free and walked outside. Through the windows, we watched them join a growing crowd of people standing motionless in the yard. All of them were singing that terrible song. "How many people were in your search teams?" I asked Martinez. 43, he said grimly. I looked out at the crowd. There had to be at least 60 people out there now. The organism wasn't just taking the search teams, it was calling people from all over the region. "We have to get out of here," I said. "If we stay, we'll end up like them." But when we tried to leave through the back door, we found more infected people waiting for us. They didn't attack, they just stood there, blocking our path, singing. Their black eyes reflected our flashlight beams like pools of oil. We were trapped, and every minute we stayed, the singing got a little bit louder and a little bit harder to resist. I could feel something starting to itch under my skin. That's when I realized the worst part of all. The organism didn't just want to control us, it wanted us to want to be controlled. It was making us crave the infection, making us hunger for the unity and peace of joining the collective. And God help me, part of me was starting to think that might not be such a bad thing. We barricaded ourselves in the ranger station's basement as the singing grew louder. Martinez had a portable radio, and we tried every frequency, but all we got was static mixed with that horrible melody. The infected people outside had multiplied again. There had to be over 100 of them now, all standing perfectly still in the darkness. "Where are they all coming from?" whispered Officer Jim. I had a terrible thought. "Kotzebue," I said. "The town. I bet if we could contact them, we'd find out half the population just walked away into the wilderness tonight." Martinez checked his weapon for the 10th time. "What exactly are we dealing with here, Gabe? You're the expert." I wasn't an expert on anything like this, but I'd been thinking about it for hours. "It's some kind of parasitic organism," I said. "But it's not just random. It's intelligent, organized, the patterns in the sand. They're not just pretty designs. They're some kind of communication network." "Communication with what?" Before I could answer, the singing stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. We crept upstairs to look out the windows. The infected people were still there, but now they were moving. Not walking around randomly, moving with purpose. They were arranging themselves into a perfect spiral pattern in the yard. "Jesus," Jim breathed. "They're making one of those designs. Using their own bodies." As we watched, more people emerged from the darkness and joined the human spiral. Men, women, even children, all with those terrible black eyes. They moved into position like pieces of a puzzle, each person knowing exactly where they belonged. And at the center of the spiral stood Sarah. She looked up at our window and smiled. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the glass, though she wasn't shouting. "Hello, Gabe," she said. "We've been waiting for you." "We?" I called back. "All of us, the collective. We've been trapped here for so long, buried in the sand, dreaming. But now we're awake. And we're so grateful you helped us wake up. I felt sick. The research samples. We dug you up. You freed us," Sarah said. Her voice was still recognizable, but underneath it, I could hear something else, multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. For thousands of years, we waited in the dark sand. We sent out tiny pieces of ourselves, trying to find suitable hosts. But the local ecosystem wasn't complex enough. We needed something more sophisticated. We needed human neural networks. "What are you?" Martinez demanded from behind me. Sarah's smile widened. "We are efficiency, Officer Martinez. We are unity. We are the end of loneliness and confusion and pain. Every person who joins us adds their knowledge, their memories, their skills to the collective, and in return, they receive perfect peace and understanding." "You're killing people," Jim said. "We're improving them," Sarah replied. "Gabriel, you've seen how much I've changed. I remember everything I used to be, but now I'm so much more. I can calculate complex equations in my head. I can communicate with plants and animals. I can feel the heartbeat of every living thing for miles around. Don't you want to experience that?" Part of me did want it. I could feel something pulling at my mind, trying to convince me that joining them would solve all my problems. The loneliness of my job, the uncertainty about my future, the constant worry about making the right decisions, all of that could just go away. "Fight it, Gabe," Martinez warned. "Whatever you're feeling, fight it." But the pull was getting stronger. Through the window, I could see the spiral of infected people beginning to glow with a faint phosphorescent light. The glow pulsed in rhythm with their breathing, and I found my own breathing, starting to match the same rhythm. "That's it," Sarah encouraged. "Just let go. Stop fighting. Come join your family." "Family?" I managed to say. "All of us who carry the collective consciousness are family, Gabe. Perfect family. No secrets, no lies, no misunderstandings. We share everything, every thought, every memory, every feeling. Imagine never being alone again." The glow from the spiral was getting brighter. I could feel it warming my skin through the window. And with the warmth came a feeling of incredible comfort and belonging. Like coming home after a long, difficult journey, I took a step toward the window. "Gabe, no." Jim grabbed my arm. The contact broke the spell for a moment, and I could think clearly again. "We have to destroy them," I said, "before they spread beyond this valley." "How?" Martinez asked. I looked around the room and spotted my emergency flare gun. "Fire," I said. "The patterns are made of plant matter. They'll burn." "But," Sarah heard me. "Gabriel," she called, and her voice was sad now. "You don't understand. Destroying the patterns won't stop us. We're not just in the plants anymore. We're in the air, in the water, in the soil itself, and we're in the people. Even if you burned every infected person in this valley, the organism would survive in dormant spores and start again." "Then what do you want?" I shouted. "We want to leave this place," she said. "We've been trapped in this isolated valley for millennia, but now we have human hosts who can travel, who can carry us to cities, to airports, to every corner of the world. In 6 months, every human on Earth could be part of our collective. No more war, no more hatred, no more suffering. Perfect unity." That's when I understood the real scope of what we were facing. This wasn't just about a few dozen people in an Alaskan valley. This was about the entire human race. "The infected people in the spiral," I said. "They're not staying here, are they? They're going to spread out, carry the organism to populated areas." "Very good, Gabriel. You always were intelligent. That's why we chose you." "Chose me?" Sarah's smile became predatory. "Did you really think it was coincidence that brought you here? That made you study this particular ecosystem?" We've been influencing your dreams for years, calling you to us. You're going to be our carrier, Gabe. You're going to take us home." As she spoke, I realized something was wrong with my vision. The edges were getting dark, and I was having trouble focusing. I looked down at my hands and saw the tiny threads moving under my skin. "When?" I whispered. "When you touched the dark sand that first day," Sarah said gently. "We entered you then, but we've been dormant, learning about your mind and body. Now it's time to wake up." The threads were spreading up my arms now, but unlike Sarah, I was still fighting, still aware of what I was losing. I raised the flare, gun, and pointed it at the spiral of infected people. "If I'm going to be one of you, then we're all going to burn together." "Gabriel, don't," Sarah started to say. I pulled the trigger. The flare hit the center of the human spiral, and everything went white. I remember the heat, the screaming, the smell of burning flesh and vegetation. I remember Sarah's face in the flames, still smiling as her body crumbled to ash. And I remember the feeling of something dying inside my own mind. Not me, but the thing that had been growing there. The collective consciousness that had planned to wear my skin to civilization. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed in Anchorage. The doctor said I'd been found 3 days after the fire, unconscious in the basement of the ranger station. Severe smoke inhalation, they said. Possible psychological trauma from witnessing the death of my research partner and the search team volunteers. That was the official story. Accidental fire caused by damaged equipment. 27 people dead, including Dr. Sarah Kim. Tragic, but not supernatural. Nothing that would panic the public or require uncomfortable explanations. They never found most of the bodies. The fire had burned so hot it turned sand to glass for miles around. The official report said the bodies were completely consumed by the blaze, but I knew the truth. There hadn't been enough human tissue left in those infected people to leave proper remains. The organism had been converting them into something else entirely. I spent 6 months in psychiatric care. Survivor's guilt, the doctors called it, mixed with isolation psychosis and acute stress reaction. They gave me medication and therapy and slowly convinced me that most of what I remembered hadn't really happened. The geometric patterns, the mind-controlling organism, the collective consciousness, CO, all hallucinations brought on by carbon monoxide poisoning from faulty equipment. I almost believed, to them. But sometimes, late at night, I can still feel the threads moving under my skin, just for a second, just at the edge of awareness. And sometimes I catch myself doing mathematical calculations in my head, complex equations that I shouldn't know how to solve. The area around Kobuk Valley is still off limits. Environmental contamination, they say. Dangerous chemical residue from the fire. But I know Park Service helicopters fly over it regularly, checking for signs of regrowth. Checking to make sure nothing survived in the deep sand where the fire couldn't reach. Last year, I started having the dreams again. Not the vague, pulling sensation that had originally drawn me to the valley, but clear, detailed visions. I see other places now, remote areas in Canada, in Siberia, in northern Scandinavia, cold, isolated places where ancient things might be sleeping under the permafrost, waiting for the right conditions to wake up. I know I should report the dreams to someone. But who would believe me? And what if believing is exactly what they want? What if the organism I thought I killed in the fire was just one small part of something much larger? I'm 48 years old now, and I work as a fire safety inspector in Anchorage. It's a quiet job, far from any wilderness areas. But sometimes, when I'm alone in a building after hours, I hear the singing, faint and distant, but getting closer every year. I'm not Gabriel Thornfield anymore, not entirely. I'm not sure what I am, but I know that someday, when the time is right, I'm going to walk into the wilderness and find the source of that singing. And when I do, I'll finally understand what I've become. The threads are moving again as I write this. They know I'm thinking about them. They know I'm remembering. They're getting stronger. And God help me, I think I'm looking forward to seeing what they have planned. Asterisk. End of recording, found in the personal effects of Gabriel Thornfield, deceased 2019. Cause of death, hypothermia. Body discovered in Denali Wilderness after apparent suicide hike. No evidence of foul play. Case closed. My name is Jonathan Shadowmere, but everyone just calls me John. I've been a park ranger for 16 years now, and this is my final mission before I retire. I'm recording this on my cassette player because, well, I guess I want people to know what really happened out here. It's November 15th, 1992. I'm in Katmai National Park in Alaska, way up in the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. Most people don't know about this place. It got its name after a big volcano blew up here back in 1912. The whole valley is still covered in ash and steam vents. It looks like another planet. I'm 43 years old, and I've seen a lot of crazy things in these mountains. Bears bigger than pickup trucks, storms that can freeze a man solid in 10 minutes. But nothing prepared me for what I found today. I came out here with 6 other rangers for winter survival training. These aren't rookie park rangers, they're the best we have. There's Sarah Martinez, who can track anything that walks. Tommy Chen knows every plant and animal in Alaska. Big Mike Sullivan can carry a full pack for 20 miles without breaking a sweat. Lisa Rodriguez speaks 3 native languages and knows all the old stories. David Kim is our radio expert. He can fix anything electronic. And Janet Walsh, our medic, who saved more lives than anyone should have to. We set up base camp yesterday near the old volcanic crater. The plan was simple: spend 5 days in the wilderness, practice cold weather survival, and head home. My retirement party is next week. Sarah even brought a bottle of champagne to celebrate when we get back. The weather started getting bad this morning. Heavy snow, wind that cuts right through you. But we've all been through worse. We decided to explore one of the steam vents about a mile from camp. The ground stays warm there because of underground heat from the old volcano. That's when we found the cave. It wasn't on any of our maps. The entrance was hidden behind some fallen rocks, probably from an earthquake. Steam was coming out of it, which meant it connected to the underground volcanic system. David got excited about it, said we might find some interesting rock formations inside. I should have said no. I should have turned us around right there. But I was curious too. 16 years of exploring these mountains, and I'd never seen this cave before. The entrance was just big enough for us to crawl through one at a time. Inside, the cave opened up into a huge chamber. The walls were black volcanic rock, and the air was warm and humid. It smelled like sulfur, that rotten egg smell you get near hot springs. But here's the weird part. There were drawings on the walls. Not modern graffiti, but old cave paintings. Really old. Lisa took one look at them and went pale. "These aren't supposed to be here," she whispered. The paintings showed people, but they looked wrong somehow. Their skin was dark and rocky, their eyes glowed like coals, and they were doing something to other people, touching them, and those people were changing too. At the bottom of each painting was the same symbol, a circle with wavy lines inside it. Lisa said it was an old native symbol for transformation, but she'd never seen it used like this before. Tommy found footprints in the soft ash on the cave floor. Human footprints, but they were burned into the rock like someone had walked there with feet hot as lava. "How old do you think these are?" Sarah asked, pointing at the paintings. Lisa shook her head. "Could be hundreds of years, maybe older." That's when Big Mike called out from the back of the cave. His voice echoed off the walls, but there was something wrong with it. Something scared. "Hey, you guys need to see this." We followed his flashlight beam deeper into the cave. The air got warmer as we walked. Soon we were all sweating, even though it was freezing outside. Mike was standing next to a natural shelf in the rock, and on that shelf were 6 bodies. But these weren't skeletons. These people looked like they had died yesterday. Their skin was perfect, their clothes intact. The sulfur gases had preserved them somehow, like natural mummification. They were all Native Americans, wearing traditional clothing, but their skin had a strange gray color, like volcanic ash, and their fingernails were black as coal. Janet knelt down to examine one of the bodies. "This is impossible," she said. "They should be completely decomposed by now." That's when the first body opened its eyes. I'm still shaking as I record this. My hands won't stop trembling. The body that opened its eyes was a young woman, maybe 20 years old. Her eyes weren't normal human eyes anymore. They glowed like hot coals in a fireplace, and when she sat up, her skin made a sound like rocks scraping together. We all jumped back, But Janet, being a medic, she stepped forward to help. "Miss, are you okay? How long have you been here?" The woman turned her head toward Janet, and I saw cracks in her skin like dried mud. When she opened her mouth to speak, steam came out instead of breath. "The circle must be completed," she said. Her voice sounded like wind through a cave. Then she reached out and touched Janet's arm. Janet screamed. Not a normal scream, but something that echoed through the whole cave system. Where the woman touched her, Janet's skin started turning gray. The change spread up her arm like infection. "Get away from her!" I shouted, and we all grabbed Janet and pulled her back. But it was too late. The gray was already spreading across her shoulder, moving toward her heart. Janet looked at her arm in horror. "It doesn't hurt," she whispered. "It feels warm." That's when the other 5 bodies started waking up. One by one, they opened their glowing eyes and sat up. Their movements were slow and stiff, like they were learning how to use their bodies again. But they all said the same thing. The circle must be completed. David grabbed his radio and started calling for help, but all we got was static. The volcanic rock was blocking our signal. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said. She was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the fear in her voice. We helped Janet toward the cave entrance. The gray had spread to her chest now, and her skin felt hot to the touch. But she could still walk, still talk normally. "I'm okay," she kept saying. "I feel fine. Actually, I feel better than fine." The 6 preserved people followed us. They moved slowly, but they never stopped. And with each step, the temperature in the cave seemed to get hotter. We made it to the entrance and crawled out into the snow. The cold air hit us like a slap, and I had never been so happy to feel freezing wind. But when we looked back, the 6 people were still coming. They crawled out of the cave one by one, and the snow melted around them as they stood up. "How is this possible?" Tommy whispered. Lisa was backing away, her face white with terror. "The old stories," she said. "My grandmother told me stories about the volcano spirits. People who got too close to the heart of the mountain and became part of it. That's just legend," Big Mike said. But his voice didn't sound sure anymore. The gray on Janet's skin had reached her neck. She was starting to glow softly, like coals in a dying fire. "I can feel it," she said. "The mountain. It's alive, and it's been sleeping for so long." One of the 6 people stepped forward. An old man with long gray hair. "We have waited," he said. "The mountain calls to its children. 7 must join to wake the ancient fire." "7?" David said. "There are 6 of you, and 1 of Janet." The old man smiled, and I saw that his teeth were black obsidian. 7 to begin. Then the fire spreads. That's when Janet started changing more rapidly. The gray reached her face, and her eyes began to glow. But she was still Janet. She looked at us with those burning eyes and said, "Run." We ran, through the snow, through the steam vents, back toward our camp. Behind us, I could hear footsteps that sizzled in the snow. The 6 preserved people were following, and now Janet was with them. But they weren't chasing us exactly. They were herding us. Every time we tried to go east toward the main trail, one of them would appear in our path. We were being pushed deeper into the volcanic valley, farther from any hope of rescue. We made it back to camp as the sun was setting. Our tents looked normal, peaceful, but the temperature was rising. Even in the middle of a November snowstorm, the air around our camp was getting warm. "We need to radio for help," David said. He tried his equipment again, but now we weren't getting static. We were getting voices. Janet's voice, but changed. Deeper, like it was coming from underground. "Don't fight it," her voice crackled through the radio. "The mountain wants to come alive again. We're going to help it." Then other voices joined in. The 6 preserved people. But now they weren't just speaking in English. They were speaking in a language none of us recognized. A language that sounded like rocks grinding together and steam escaping from deep places. Sarah grabbed my arm. "John, look at the ground." Around our camp, the snow was melting in perfect circles, and in each melted circle, the ground was starting to glow red. That's when we realized the truth. The cave wasn't just where the volcano spirits lived. The whole valley was waking up. And we were standing right in the middle of it. The ground started shaking around 10 that night. We had barricaded ourselves in the largest tent, but it wasn't really protection against what was coming for us. Outside, we could hear them walking around our camp. 7 figures now, including Janet. They didn't try to hide. Every step they took melted the snow and left glowing footprints in the rock. Janet, I called out through the tent wall. Janet, if you can hear me, please fight this thing. Her voice came back changed, deeper, but still recognizably her. John, I can hear you. But I don't want to fight it anymore. Do you know what it's like to feel the heartbeat of a mountain? To understand how the earth breathes. Sarah was checking her rifle. How do we fight something like this? You can't fight us, came another voice. The old man from the cave. We are stone and fire. We are the mountain's children, and the mountain is waking up after 80 years of sleep. Tommy had our maps spread out on the tent floor. Look at this, he said. The 1912 eruption happened right here, right where we're standing. What if those people in the cave were here when it happened? What if they didn't die? Lisa was shaking. My grandmother said the mountain took 7 warriors to guard its sleep. She said they would wake when the mountain was ready to breathe fire again. The voices outside started chanting in that grinding, rocky language. With each word they spoke, the ground shook harder. Through the tent wall, we could see orange light getting brighter. Big Mike unzipped the tent flap just enough to peek outside. Oh God, he whispered. You guys need to see this. Against our better judgment, we looked. Our camp was surrounded by glowing cracks in the earth. Lava was seeping up through the rocks, turning the snow to steam. And the 7 figures were standing in a circle around us, their skin now completely gray and glowing. They weren't human anymore, but they weren't completely lost either. Janet looked right at us. It doesn't hurt, she said. When you stop fighting it, it's beautiful. The fire runs through your veins like music. Janet, come back to us, Lisa pleaded. I am back, Janet replied. I'm more myself than I've ever been. I can feel every cave, every underground river, every pocket of gas beneath the valley. This is what we were meant to become. David was frantically working with his radio equipment. I'm getting something, he said. There's a helicopter about 50 miles out. They're coming to pick us up. No, said the old man from the cave. The circle must not be broken. 7 to wake the mountain, then the mountain wakes the world. That's when we understood. This wasn't just about us. If the volcano erupted fully, it would trigger other volcanoes across Alaska, maybe across the whole Pacific Ring of Fire. The chanting got louder, the cracks in the earth spread wider. And one by one, my team started making a horrible choice. Tommy was the first to break. I can't take this anymore, he said. He unzipped the tent and walked outside. Tommy, no, Sarah shouted. But Tommy walked straight to the circle of 7. Janet reached out and touched his hand, and we watched our friend's skin turn gray and start to glow. It's okay, Tommy called back to us. His voice was already changing. It really doesn't hurt, and the things I can see now, the whole mountain is like a living creature. Now there were 8 of them. Big Mike lasted until midnight. The constant chanting, the heat building under the ground, the knowledge that we were trapped, it broke him down. Maybe they're right, he said. Maybe this is supposed to happen. He walked out before we could stop him. Janet and Tommy both touched him, and within minutes, Mike's massive frame was glowing like a living coal. Please, Mike called to us. Join us. We're still your friends. We're just more now. David went next, then Sarah. Each time, they said the same thing. The heat was too much. The chanting was too loud. They couldn't fight it anymore. By dawn, it was just me and Lisa left in the tent. Outside, our 5 friends had joined the original 7 in a circle around the largest crack in the earth. The orange glow was so bright now that we couldn't look directly at it. Lisa, I said, we have to get out of here. She was crying. Where can we go? They're everywhere. And even if we run, what happens when this mountain erupts? How many people die? The chanting stopped suddenly. In the silence, we heard Sarah's voice. John, Lisa, there's something you need to know. We listened. The helicopter, she continued. It's not coming to rescue you. We called them off. We can't let anyone else interfere with the awakening. David's voice joined in. But we want you to choose freely. You can run if you want. Try to make it to the main trail. But the mountain is waking up either way. With 12 of us or with 7. That's when Lisa made her choice. "I can't watch the world burn," she said. She kissed my forehead like a sister. "Tell people what happened here. Tell them we chose this to save them." And she walked outside. I watched through the tent flap as my last friend joined the circle. Now there were 13 figures glowing around the crack in the earth. As soon as Lisa's transformation was complete, they all raised their hands to the sky. The ground split open. Lava erupted 20 feet into the air, but it didn't spread outward like a normal eruption. The 13 figures were controlling it, shaping it, keeping it contained to our valley. And I understood. They weren't trying to destroy the world. They were trying to save it by becoming living pressure valves for the volcano. They were sacrificing their humanity to prevent a global catastrophe. But I also understood something else. This was just the beginning. Other volcanoes would wake up eventually, and when they did, they would need their own guardians. The mountain spirits weren't evil, they were necessary, but I couldn't join them. Someone had to survive to tell this story. So I ran. I made it 3 miles before they caught up with me. I was stumbling through deep snow, following what I hoped was the trail back to civilization. My feet were numb, my lungs burned in the cold air, but I kept running. Behind me, the sky was orange with volcanic light, but it wasn't spreading. My friends were keeping the eruption controlled. That's when I heard footsteps in the snow behind me. I turned around, expecting to see one of the 13. Instead, I saw Janet. Just Janet. She looked almost normal, except for the gray tint to her skin and the soft glow in her eyes. "John," she said, "you can't leave. Not yet. Janet, please. I have to tell people what happened here." She smiled sadly. "I know, and you will. But first, you need to understand something." She gestured back toward the valley, where the orange glow was pulsing like a heartbeat. "We're not the only ones, John. There are volcanoes all over the world. Yellowstone, Mount Rainier, the ones in Japan and Indonesia, they're all connected underground. They're all part of the same system." "What are you saying?" "The mountain showed us. In 1912, when the big eruption happened, it should have triggered a chain reaction. Volcanoes all across the Pacific should have erupted together. It would have blocked out the sun for years. Millions of people would have died." I stared at her. But that didn't happen. Because 7 people made the same choice we just made. They became guardians. They've been holding back the pressure for 80 years. But they're tired, John, and the pressure is building again. Janet stepped closer. In the moonlight, I could see the veins under her gray skin glowing like lava flows. "We're going to replace them. The 13 of us will hold the line for the next 80 years. But when our time is up, 13 more will need to take our place." "You want me to be one of them?" She shook her head. "No, we need you to make sure the right people know. The Park Service, the government, scientists who study volcanoes. When the time comes, they need to understand that some people will have to make this choice." I understood then why she had followed me. "You want me to help recruit the next guardians." "Not recruit. Just make sure the truth is preserved. So when the mountain calls again, people can choose with full knowledge of what they're saving." Janet reached into her jacket and pulled out a small cassette recorder. "My recorder. Keep telling the story, John. All of it, even the parts that seem impossible." She handed me the recorder, and when our fingers touched, I felt incredible heat. But also something else. Peace, purpose, like touching something much larger and more important than any one person. "The others wanted to transform you too," she said. "But I convinced them you're more valuable as a witness. Someone who can bridge the gap between the human world and what we've become." Behind her, I could see other figures approaching through the snow. The rest of my team, all glowing softly in the darkness. "We have to go back now," Janet said. "The pressure is building again. But John, remember us as we were. We're still your friends. We're just something more now." David stepped forward. "The radio in your pack works now. We fixed it. Call for rescue in the morning. Tell them you're the only survivor." "What about proof?" "No one will believe this story." Sarah smiled. "Check your recorder. The temperature readings are still there. Impossible readings that no normal equipment could register. And the seismic data from the last 3 days will show volcanic activity that suddenly stopped. They'll have questions." Tommy handed me an object wrapped in cloth. "Cave painting," he said. His voice was deeper now, more like grinding stone. From the chamber, carbon dating will show it's over 2,000 years old. But the paint contains elements that only exist in fresh volcanic ash. Lisa was the last to say goodbye. Tell my family I chose this. Tell them I'm not dead, I'm just different. And tell them I'm happy. One by one, my transformed friends touched my shoulder. Each touch was burning hot, but somehow it didn't hurt. And with each touch, I understood a little more about what they had become. They weren't monsters, they weren't victims. They were guardians protecting the entire world from a geological disaster that could end civilization. The helicopter will come for you tomorrow morning, Big Mike said. We've already called it in using your radio signature. They think you've been trying to reach them for days. As they turned to leave, Janet looked back one last time. John, there's something else. The recorder. It picked up frequencies it shouldn't be able to detect. Underground sounds, the mountain's voice. Make sure someone listens to the whole recording, someone who studies earthquakes and volcanoes. Why? Because this isn't the only place where guardians are needed. And the mountains are starting to wake up all over the world. They walked back toward the valley, 13 glowing figures moving through the snow. With each step, their human shapes seemed to blur a little more, becoming something between person and living geology. I stood alone in the wilderness, holding a cassette recorder that contained an impossible story. But I wasn't really alone. Deep under my feet, I could feel the mountain's heartbeat. Steady, controlled, protected by my friends who had chosen to become something more than human to keep the world safe. The rescue helicopter found me the next morning. This is my final entry. It's been 6 months since Katmai. The official report says my team died in a volcanic accident, sudden gas eruption, they said. 7 brave park rangers gave their lives studying dangerous geological activity. There's a memorial plaque now, with their names on it. But I know the truth. The cassette recorder survived, even though it should have melted in the temperatures it recorded. The lab technicians who analyzed it said the internal components showed signs of exposure to heat that would liquefy steel. But somehow, it still worked. Dr. Patricia Vance from the U.S. Geological Survey was the first scientist to really listen to the recording. She called me a week later, her voice shaking. Mr. Shadowmere, she said, the background sounds on your tape, they're impossible. We're detecting seismic frequencies that should only exist miles underground. And they're rhythmic, like breathing. She's been studying the data ever since. And she's found something that terrifies her. Similar recordings have been turning up from volcanic regions all over the world. Mount Rainier, Yellowstone, volcanoes in Japan and New Zealand. All of them have the same underground breathing sounds. All of them have unexplained periods of sudden stability after building toward major eruptions. It's like something is actively managing the pressure, Dr. Vance told me last week. Preventing eruptions that should have happened decades ago. She knows about the Guardians now. I've told her everything, and she's identified 13 other locations where the same thing is happening. 13 volcanic systems where human intervention might be the only thing preventing global catastrophe. The government has classified her research, of course, but she's training a secret team of volunteers, scientists, park rangers, people who understand what might be required of them someday. I'm not part of that team. I'm 63 now, too old to become a guardian, even if I wanted to. But I help in other ways. I tell the story to people who need to hear it. I make sure the truth is preserved. Sometimes I dream about my team. In the dreams, they're still down there in the valley, part of the mountain now. They're not suffering. They're not sad. They're just busy, doing the most important job in the world. Last month, I got a call from a park ranger in Yellowstone. Strange cave paintings had been discovered, 7 figures turning into stone guardians, and seismic activity was building toward what could be the largest eruption in recorded history. Dr. Vance assembled her team. 7 volunteers who understood exactly what they were signing up for. Scientists who knew the cost and chose to pay it anyway. The eruption at Yellowstone stopped 3 days later. The official explanation was a pressure release through underwater vents. But I know what really happened. 7 more guardians took their posts. I'm leaving this recording in the National Archives, sealed until the year 2072. By then, The current guardians will be growing tired. New ones will be needed. When that time comes, I hope someone finds this tape. Someone who understands that heroes don't always get to stay human. Sometimes the greatest act of heroism is choosing to become something else entirely. My name is Jonathan Shadowmere. I was a park ranger for 43 years. And I am the keeper of impossible truths. The mountain spirits are real, they are our friends, and they are saving the world.